The most feared man in the city was supposed to vanish inside a hotel laundry cart before midnight, wrapped in stained linen, too drugged to speak, too weak to fight, and too important for the world to ever know he had been carried out through the servant's door. The men pushing him through the lower halls of the Grand Aurelia Hotel wore suits that cost more than Leah Moreno made in months, but their faces were calm in the cruel way only powerful men could afford. They did not look frightened. They did not rush like criminals. They moved like men who believed the whole city had already agreed to look away. And maybe it had. In a hotel built for diamonds, senators, movie stars, and quiet monsters with clean hands, nobody paid attention to a fat banquet server in worn-out shoes carrying dirty plates through the back hallway. Nobody ever had. That was why Leah saw everything. Rain lashed against the tall windows of the Grand Aurelia, turning the city lights outside into trembling gold ribbons. The storm had been growling over the skyline all evening, rattling the glass and making the old service elevators groan like tired animals. Upstairs, the private charity gala had finally ended after hours of speeches, champagne, soft music, and smiling men who donated money with one hand while hiding blood on the other. Leah had worked the event from the first tray of sparkling water to the last abandoned dessert plate. Her feet ached so badly that every step felt like walking on small stones, and the black uniform vest pulled tight across her stomach no matter how often she tugged it down. Her curls had slipped loose from their pins. Her cheeks were shiny with sweat, and there was a dark stain near her sleeve from spilled coffee that one guest had blamed on her, even though he had knocked the cup over himself. That was how the night usually went for Leah. People looked through her until something went wrong. Then suddenly she became easy to see, easy to blame, easy to laugh at. The banquet captain had snapped at her twice for being too slow, even though she had carried trays heavier than anyone else's, and stayed late after 2 servers called out sick. One of the younger waitresses had whispered that Leah moved like a refrigerator in dress shoes. A man at table 6 had asked if she was allowed to eat the leftovers, then laughed with his wife, like it was the cleverest thing anyone had ever said. Leah had heard every word. She always heard. She had simply learned to keep her face still and her voice soft, because rent was due, medicine was expensive, and pride did not pay hospital bills. Mateo did not know most of that. Leah made sure he did not. To him, she was the aunt who came home tired but smiling, who warmed soup on the tiny stove above the laundromat, who helped him line up his toy trains on the windowsill when his chest hurt too much for him to play on the floor. He was gentle in a way that made the world feel too rough for him, with thin wrists, serious eyes, and a heart that had never worked the way it should. The doctors said words Leah understood only because fear had forced her to learn them. Procedures, specialists, waiting lists, risk, payment options. Mateo only understood that sometimes his body felt like a room with not enough air in it, and that someday, when he was better, he wanted to ride a train into the mountains where the clouds touched the trees. That dream was the reason Leah stayed late. It was the reason she swallowed every insult and counted every tip twice before hiding the bills in an envelope under her mattress. It was the reason she kept moving long after her back begged her to stop. So when the last guests floated out through the marble lobby beneath crystal chandeliers, Leah went back into the ballroom with a grey plastic tub and began clearing the tables. The Grand Aurelia looked different after midnight, without the music, without the laughter, without the warm mask of luxury. The hotel felt hollow and watchful. The ballroom smelled of wet roses, melted wax, rich food, and expensive perfume fading into the cold bite of cleaning spray. Somewhere behind the walls, pipes knocked softly. Somewhere below, thunder rolled through the bones of the building. Leah was carrying a stack of folded tablecloths toward the service corridor when she heard the sound. It was small at first, just a hard scrape near the old freight elevator, then a low, muffled groan that made her stop with her hand on the linen cart. She stood very still. The hallway ahead was narrow, lit by buzzing yellow lights, with silver carts lined against one wall, and laundry bins waiting to be taken downstairs. Most workers had already gone to the staff locker room. The whole back wing felt empty, except for the storm and the faint hum of machines. Then came a man's voice, low and sharp. "Keep his head down. If anyone sees his face, this gets messy." Leah's breath caught. She should have turned around. Every sensible part of her knew that. Poor women did not survive by stepping into rich men's secrets. Banquet servers did not ask questions when men in tailored suits moved through service halls after a Mafia-linked gala. Leah had spent her life surviving by noticing danger early and walking the other way. But then the laundry cart rolled into view, and she saw the hand hanging over the side. It was a man's hand, large and pale, with a heavy black ring on one finger. His cuff was expensive, white once, now wrinkled and damp. His body was half buried beneath a heap of hotel linen, but his head had slipped to one side. Leah saw dark hair, a strong jaw rough with stubble, and a face drained of color. One of the suited men caught his chin and shoved his head down again with cold impatience. The other held a small syringe between two fingers, already empty. Leah pressed herself behind a tall shelf stacked with folded towels. Her heart beat so loudly she was sure they would hear it. The men stopped near the freight elevator. One checked his phone. The other looked toward the back exit and cursed under his breath. "The storm knocked out the lower gate," he said. "We have to wait until Sable's driver gets around to the loading dock." Sable. Leah did not know why the name made the air feel colder. Maybe it was the way he said it, not like a friend, but like a man repeating the name of someone too dangerous to disappoint. The man in the cart moved again. It was barely anything, a twitch, a faint breath. But it was enough. He was alive. Leah stared at him, trapped between fear and the kind of guilt that had shaped her whole life. She thought of Mateo asleep under his train blanket, trusting that the world still had good people in it, because Leah kept pretending it did. She thought of the times strangers had stepped around her when she dropped groceries on the bus, or watched her struggle up the laundromat stairs with medicine and soup and never offered a hand. She thought of how easy it was for people to decide someone else was not their problem. The two men walked a few steps away, arguing quietly near the corner. Leah's fingers tightened around the linen in her arms. "No," she told herself. "Do not do this. Do not be stupid. Do not make Mateo an orphan because you wanted to be brave for 1 second." But the man in the laundry cart made a faint sound, broken and helpless, and that was what ruined her. Leah moved before courage had time to leave her. She slipped out from behind the shelf, pushed her own linen cart forward, and blocked the view from the corner. Her hands shook as she pulled back the top layer of sheets. The man was heavier than she expected, solid beneath the fine suit, all broad shoulders and dead weight. She whispered an apology to him even though he could not hear her, then used every bit of strength in her aching body to shift him from one cart to the other. Pain shot through her lower back. Her breath came in short, panicked bursts. She nearly dropped him once, biting down hard on a cry as his shoulder hit the cart rail. The men were still arguing. The storm helped her, thunder cracking so loudly the hallway lights flickered. She buried him beneath clean linen, stacked towels over his body, and draped a stained tablecloth across the top. Then she pushed. The cart felt impossible at first, its wheels catching against the uneven floor, but Leah knew the hotel's back corridors better than any manager in a clean suit. She knew which doors stuck, which cameras had blind spots, which elevator groaned but still worked if you held the button down. She had spent years being invisible in those halls, and now invisibility became the only weapon she had. Behind her, one of the men cursed. Leah did not look back. She turned down the dishwashing corridor, past steaming sinks and silent racks of glasses, then into the old staff passage that ran behind the kitchens. The cart rattled too loudly. Her shoes slipped on the wet tile. The man under the linen gave one shallow breath, then another. She kept whispering, almost to him, almost to herself, "Stay alive. Just stay alive. Please stay alive." When she reached the service door near the alley, the rain hit her like thrown gravel. Cold water soaked her hair and uniform in seconds. The loading area was empty except for overflowing trash bins and the old delivery van from the laundromat downstairs, the one Mr. Alvarez let her borrow when Mateo had hospital appointments and the buses ran late. Leah should not have had the keys. She had forgotten to return them after the last appointment. That tiny mistake, that ordinary little piece of luck, suddenly felt like fate reaching out with shaking hands. Getting the man from the cart into the van took everything she had. Twice she nearly slipped. Once his head rolled against her shoulder and his breath brushed her neck, faint and cold. Up close, he smelled like rain, expensive smoke, and something bitter from the drug in his skin. His face was beautiful in a hard, dangerous way, the kind of face carved for shadows instead of sunlight. Even unconscious, he looked like someone people obeyed. Leah hated that she noticed. She hated even more that she was afraid of him, and afraid for him at the same time. By the time she drove away from the Grand Aurelia, her hands were cramped around the steering wheel. She kept expecting headlights to flare behind her. She kept expecting a gunshot, a shout, the black shape of another car sliding out of the storm. But the city swallowed her whole. Rain blurred the windshield. Sirens wailed somewhere far off. The rich part of town gave way to closed shops, dark apartment windows, old brick buildings, and streets where puddles shone under broken streetlights. Her apartment sat above Alvarez Laundry, reached by a narrow staircase that always smelled like soap, coins, and warm metal. Leah parked in the alley and sat still for one breath, then another, shaking so badly she could barely open the van door. She had no plan. She had saved a man from being taken, but now she had brought danger home, worse than home, to Mateo. The thought nearly made her sick. But leaving the stranger in the van was not an option. He was burning with fever now, his skin clammy, his pulse uneven beneath her fingers. Leah dragged, pushed, and half carried him up the stairs, one painful step at a time, stopping often to listen for movement below. By the time she got him into her small living room, she was soaked, trembling, and breathing so hard her chest hurt. She laid him on the faded couch, pulled off his wet jacket, and found the place near his neck where the needle had gone in. A dark bruise had already started to bloom. Mateo appeared in the hallway wearing his soft blue pajamas and holding his favorite toy train against his chest. "Tia Leah," he whispered. "Who is that?" Leah froze. For one terrible second, she wanted to lie. She wanted to say he was no one, just someone from work, just someone who needed help. But Mateo's eyes were too open, too trusting. So she knelt in front of him, her wet uniform clinging to her knees, and touched his cheek. "He is someone who got hurt," she said softly. "I am going to help him for tonight, and then we will figure out what to do. Is he bad?" Leah looked back at the man on her couch. His hands were scarred. A gun was tucked under his waistband, which she had not noticed until now. Her stomach dropped. Slowly, carefully, she removed it with 2 fingers and set it high on the kitchen cabinet, where Mateo could never reach. Then she turned back to her nephew and forced her voice to stay calm. "I do not know yet." Mateo considered this in the grave way he considered everything. Then he walked past her, slow and careful, and placed his little toy train on the edge of the coffee table beside the unconscious stranger. "So he will not be scared when he wakes up sick," Mateo said. Something inside Leah cracked open, not loudly, not all at once, just enough to hurt. She pulled Mateo into her arms, holding him gently, because his small body tired easily, and pressed her face into his hair. The stranger did not move. The storm tapped against the windows. Downstairs, one of the washing machines thumped through a heavy cycle like a tired heart refusing to stop. Leah did what she could. She checked the man's breathing. She wiped rain and sweat from his face. She called no ambulance because she had already seen enough to know hospitals might not be safe for him or for her. She searched his pockets and found no wallet, no phone, nothing but a black card with no name and a folded paper marked with a symbol she did not understand. His shirt was handmade. His watch looked worth more than the building. Every detail screamed that he belonged to a world where poor women disappeared without becoming news. Near dawn, the fever broke. Leah was sitting on the floor beside the couch with a kitchen knife in one hand and her phone in the other, ready to call for help if he stopped breathing. Mateo had fallen asleep again in her bed, curled around his pillow, the faint whistle of his breath drifting through the open door. The apartment had gone quiet except for the rain easing into a soft gray morning. Then the stranger opened his eyes. Leah stopped breathing. They were dark eyes, not confused, not weak, not grateful. For one heartbeat, they looked almost empty, like the eyes of a man waking from death and deciding whether the world deserved to continue. Then his hand shot out and closed around Leah's wrist. She gasped, dropping the knife. It hit the floor with a dull clatter. His grip was firm but not crushing, and still it filled the room with warning. "Where am I?" he asked. His voice was rough, low, and calm in a way that frightened her more than shouting would have. Leah swallowed. "My apartment. Above the laundromat on Mason Street. You were drugged. Men were taking you out of the hotel in a laundry cart. I got you out." His eyes sharpened. "The Grand Aurelia?" She nodded. His jaw tightened, and something cold moved across his face. "Who are you?" Leah almost laughed because it was such a ridiculous question after the night she had survived. She was nobody. She was the woman with wet shoes by the couch. She was the server people snapped at. She was Mateo's aunt, and most days that was the only title that mattered. "Leah Moreno," she said. "I work banquets at the hotel. Please let go of my wrist." For a moment he did not. His gaze moved over her face, her damp curls, the tired shadows under her eyes, the soft roundness of her body in the stretched black uniform. Leah waited for the look she knew too well, the quick dismissal, the little flicker of judgment people thought she did not see. It did not come. He looked at her like he was trying to understand how someone the world had trained itself to ignore had managed to steal him out from under the noses of men paid to erase him. Slowly, he released her. "You saved my life," he said. Leah rubbed her wrist and pushed herself back. "I saved a stranger. I did not know who you were." At that, the smallest shadow of a smile touched his mouth, but there was no warmth in it. "No," he said. "You did not." He sat up, and even wounded, even pale, even with a blanket slipping from his shoulders, the room seemed to shrink around him. Leah felt it then, the weight of him. Not just his size, not just the danger in his stillness, but the invisible power that followed certain men like a storm cloud. He looked toward the cabinet. "My gun," he said. "On top of the cabinet," Leah replied, "away from the child." His head turned slowly back to her. "Child?" Before Leah could answer, Mateo appeared again in the bedroom doorway, sleepy and small, dragging his blanket behind him. He looked from Leah to the stranger, then to the toy train still resting on the coffee table. "You woke up," Mateo said. The man stared at him. Something changed in his face so quickly, Leah almost missed it. The cold did not vanish, but it cracked, just a little. Mateo stepped closer before Leah could stop him. "That is my mountain train. You can hold it if you want. I use it when I have bad hospital days." The stranger looked at the toy train, then at the boy's thin hand offering it to him. For the first time since he opened his eyes, he seemed truly speechless. Leah saw his throat move. He took the toy with care that felt almost painful to watch, as if the little train weighed more than a weapon. "Thank you," he said quietly. Mateo smiled, then coughed into his sleeve. Leah was beside him at once, guiding him to the chair, checking his color, smoothing his hair back. The stranger watched every movement. His eyes missed nothing. Not the pill organizer on the counter, not the stack of medical bills tucked beneath a chipped mug, not the way Leah's hands trembled only after Mateo stopped coughing. "What is wrong with him?" he asked. Leah's shoulders stiffened. "That is not your business." "No," he said, and his voice lowered. "It is not. But someone nearly killed me last night, and you brought me into your home anyway. That makes everything in this room my concern, until I know who is coming through that door." Leah stared at him, anger warming her fear. "You do not get to wake up on my couch and take over my life." His gaze held hers. Most people would have looked away. Leah did not. Then he said, very softly, "I am Dante Rourke." The name landed in the apartment like a glass breaking in the dark. Leah had heard it before. Everyone in the city had heard it, though never too loudly. Dante Rourke, the man behind restaurants that never lost money, construction firms that always won bids, nightclubs where politicians entered through back doors, and rumors that made grown men drop their voices. Dante Rourke, whose enemies moved away, vanished, or suddenly discovered religion. Dante Rourke, whose name had floated through the hotel kitchen last night in nervous whispers before the gala began. Leah stood so fast, the chair scraped behind her. "No," she whispered. Dante looked at her without apology. "No, no, no." Leah backed away, one hand over her mouth. "I thought you were just hurt. I thought you were some businessman, some guest. I did not know. I brought you here. I brought you near Mateo." Mateo looked between them, confused. "Is he famous?" Leah could not answer. Her mind was already racing ahead to every terrible ending. The men in suits, the name Sable, the drug, the back entrance, her apartment, her nephew, her whole life hanging by a thread she had not even known she was holding. Dante rose from the couch, slower than he probably wanted to, one hand bracing against the armrest. He was still weak, but the danger in him had awakened fully now. His eyes went to the window, then the door, then the old fire escape beyond the kitchen. He was counting exits, measuring risk, becoming the kind of man his name promised. "You said men took me," he said. "Tell me exactly what you heard." Leah shook her head. "I do not want any part of this. You already have one." The words were not cruel. That made them worse. Leah looked at Mateo, who was still watching with worried eyes, and lowered her voice. One of them said, "Sable. That is all I know." For the first time, Dante Rourke looked truly dangerous. Not angry in the loud way, not shocked, just still. So still the air seemed to draw back from him. "Victor," he said. The name came out like a locked door opening to something buried and terrible. Leah felt the room tilt under her. Outside, morning traffic began to whisper through the wet street below. Downstairs, the laundromat bell jingled as someone came in with a bag of clothes, ordinary life continuing as if Leah had not pulled a wounded Mafia boss out of a hotel and carried him into the only home Mateo had. Dante took one step toward the window, his hand closing around the little toy train Mateo had given him, and for one strange second, the hard line of his face softened with a grief so old it seemed carved into him. Then the softness disappeared. "Leah Moreno," he said, turning back to her, "you did not just save me from being killed. You saved me from the one man close enough to bury me without anyone asking questions." Leah's mouth went dry. "What does that mean?" And Dante's eyes moved to Mateo, then back to her, and the answer settled over the small apartment like the last shadow before a storm. "It means Victor Sable will come looking for me," he said. "And when he finds out who helped me, he will come looking for you." Victor Sable did not come that morning. That was the mercy. The terror was knowing that he would. Leah stood in the center of her tiny apartment above the laundromat while the city woke beneath her feet, while washers spun downstairs and buses hissed along the wet street, while ordinary people bought coffee, folded shirts, complained about the rain, and lived in a world that had not yet cracked open. Dante Rourke stood by her window with Mateo's little toy train still resting in his hand, his face turned toward the glass, his eyes searching the street below like he could see danger before it had a shape. Leah wanted to scream at him to leave. She wanted to shove his gun into his hands, open the door, and send him back into whatever dark kingdom had made him. But Mateo was sitting at the kitchen table in his blue pajamas, quietly watching them both, and Leah knew children could feel fear even when adults tried to hide it. So she swallowed the scream. She did what she had always done. She made breakfast because toast was something she understood, because orange juice was normal, because Mateo needed his medicine with food, and because if she stopped moving, she might fall apart. Dante watched her from across the room as she buttered the toast with shaking hands. He did not speak for a long time. That silence should have made him feel less dangerous, but it did the opposite. It made him feel like a storm waiting politely at the door. He had asked her to tell him everything again, and she had. The men in the hotel corridor, the syringe, the laundry cart, the service elevator, the name Sable, the private foundation mentioned in a low voice near the back hall. Each detail made Dante colder, quieter, sharper. Leah could almost see the pieces connecting behind his eyes. She had thought Victor Sable was simply another criminal name, but Dante's face told her it was something more personal than betrayal and deeper than business. When she finally asked who Victor was, Dante did not answer right away. He looked down at the little train in his hand, his thumb resting on the painted roof, and said Victor had been beside him for 15 years. Advisor, friend, family in every way except blood, the kind of man who knew every door, every guard, every fear, and every wound. Then Dante told her about his sister. Her name had been Elena, and he said it with such care that Leah felt the room soften around the sound. Elena had been younger than him, bright and stubborn, the only person who could make him laugh when he was already becoming the kind of man people feared. Years ago, someone had sold her location to Dante's enemies. She was taken from a safe house that only a few trusted people knew about. Dante found her too late. Since then, he had built his life around never trusting softness again. He had turned grief into rules, rules into walls, and walls into an empire so cold and strong that no one could reach the man buried inside it. Victor had helped him build those walls. Now Dante understood that Victor may have helped create the wound that made them necessary. Leah listened with one hand pressed against the counter. She did not want to feel sorry for him. A man like Dante had probably done terrible things. Men whispered his name for a reason, but grief did not care what kind of life a person lived. It sat in the bones the same way. Leah knew that. She had watched Mateo sleep through fevers, watched doctors lower their voices, watched bills pile up like snow against a door. Pain recognized pain, even when it did not forgive it. By noon, Dante had borrowed a burner phone from Mr. Alvarez downstairs after giving the old man a look so calm and heavy that he handed it over without a single question. Dante made 3 calls, each one shorter than the last. No names, no warmth, just instructions that sounded harmless unless a person understood danger. Move the East file. Check the hospital board. Find Nico Bell. Confirm who still answers. Leah pretended not to listen, but every word landed in her chest like a stone. Mateo sat on the floor with his trains, occasionally glancing at Dante with wide, curious eyes. Dante never looked comfortable around the boy. He looked careful, almost afraid of breaking something. That afternoon, Leah's phone rang. It was the hotel. She already knew before she answered. The banquet captain's voice was crisp and fake sad, the kind of voice people use when they are enjoying power, but want it to sound like policy. There had been a complaint, there had been a missing linen cart, there were questions about her conduct during a high-profile event. Until further notice, her employment was terminated. Leah stood there with the phone against her ear, hearing her own life shrink. No job meant no rent. No rent meant no apartment, No apartment meant no safe place for Mateo between hospital visits. She thanked the woman out of habit, then ended the call and stared at the wall. Dante was watching her. Who was that? No one, Leah said. He stepped closer. Leah. She hated the way he said her name, like he already knew the lie and was giving her one chance to set it down. I got fired. Dante's jaw hardened. Because of me. Because I made a choice, she said, sharper than she meant to. Do not take that from me too. For the first time he looked almost wounded. Then he nodded once. Fair. But Victor did not stop with the job. That evening, while Leah was picking up Mateo's prescriptions from the pharmacy 3 blocks away, a black sedan slid to the curb beside her. The passenger window lowered, and Victor Sable smiled out at her like they had an appointment. He was not what she expected. He did not look wild or cruel. He looked polished, handsome in a tired silver way, with neat hair, soft leather gloves, and eyes that seemed kind until she noticed there was nothing behind them. Miss Moreno, he said, you have caused a great deal of concern. Leah's fingers tightened around the paper pharmacy bag. I do not know you. No, Victor said pleasantly, but you know Dante Rourke, or at least you know where he is. Leah felt the street tilt. People passed behind her with umbrellas. A cyclist cursed at a taxi. Life kept moving, as if she were not standing at the edge of a knife. I do not know what you are talking about. Victor sighed, not annoyed, almost sympathetic. You work too hard to be this brave. It is a bad habit poor people learn, because no one gives them permission to be tired. Your nephew is Mateo Moreno, age 8, congenital heart disease. Current medication costs more than your monthly rent. Specialist appointment at St. Agnes tomorrow morning. There is a procedure available, but the hospital has not approved the charity request yet. These things take time. Children like Mateo do not always have time. Leah could not breathe. If you go near him... Victor lifted one hand gently. I am offering help. Real help. Surgery paid in full. Recovery paid in full. A better apartment. Private care. No more begging billing departments for mercy. No more overtime. No more pretending you are not terrified every time that boy coughs. The pharmacy bag crinkled in Leah's fist. For one awful moment, the offer opened in front of her like sunlight after years underground. Mateo safe. Mateo breathing. Mateo growing up. Mateo on his mountain train with pink cheeks and strong lungs and no hospital bracelet around his wrist. Leah hated Victor for knowing exactly where to press. She hated herself more for listening. All I need, Victor said softly, is Dante's location. If he is as dangerous as people say, why should your child suffer for him? Leah's eyes burned. Dante is not my concern. Exactly. Victor smiled wider. You are a practical woman. Call me tonight. He held out a small white card with only a number printed on it. Leah did not take it. Victor leaned out just enough to tuck it into the pharmacy bag himself. His glove brushed her hand, and she went cold all over. Think of Mateo, he said. Not Dante, not loyalty, not some fantasy about being good. Think of the boy who needs you to choose him. Then the sedan pulled away, leaving Leah on the sidewalk with medicine in her hand and the devil's offer in her bag. At the hospital the next morning, the doctor confirmed the cruelty of timing. Mateo needed the procedure sooner than expected. Not someday, not next year, soon. The doctor tried to be gentle, but numbers are not gentle when they decide whether a child gets to live. Leah nodded through the explanation. She signed papers she did not fully understand. She smiled for Mateo when he asked if the doctor was going to fix the tired part of his heart. Then she stepped into the restroom, locked herself in a stall, and broke silently, both hands over her mouth so nobody would hear. When she came home, Dante was sitting at her kitchen table with maps, printouts, and a black laptop that did not belong to her. He looked up once and saw everything. Leah hated that too. She did not want to be readable. She had survived by keeping her pain folded small. "Victor came to me," she said. Dante went very still. "He knows about Mateo. He offered to pay for everything if I tell him where you are." The room changed. It did not become louder. It became deeper, as if the floor had dropped beneath them. Dante stood slowly. "And what did you tell him?" "Nothing yet." "Yet," Dante repeated. Leah flinched at the coldness in his voice, then anger rose hot through her fear. "Do not do that. Do not stand there like I owe you an easy answer. You are not the one watching an 8-year-old boy get tired from walking to the bathroom. You are not the one counting pills and tips and late fees. You are not the one hearing a doctor say soon when you have no money and no job. So yes, I thought about it. I thought about taking his offer. I thought about saving Mateo and letting your world eat itself without me." Dante's face did not move, but something in his eyes shifted. He said nothing. Leah pulled Victor's card from the pharmacy bag and threw it onto the table. "But I will not do it. I will not hand a man over to someone who drugged him and hid him in a laundry cart. I will not teach Mateo that love means becoming cruel when life scares you. I cannot control what your world does, Dante, but I can control who I become inside mine." Dante looked at the card. Then he looked at her, and for the first time since she had met him, the feared boss of the city seemed truly shaken. Not by violence, not by strategy, by her, by the simple, impossible fact that she had been offered the one thing she needed most, and still refused to betray him. "In my world," he said quietly, "people sell each other for less than a parking space. I am not in your world." "No," Dante said, voice low. "You are better than it." Leah turned away because the words hurt more than the insults ever had. Kindness was dangerous when she could not afford to believe in it. That same night, Dante arranged Mateo's treatment. Leah fought him. She told him she would not sell her loyalty. He told her he was not buying it. She told him she would not let him use Mateo as a debt. He told her debt had nothing to do with a child's heart. His voice was firm but not harsh. He said Mateo had shown kindness to a man everyone else would have left to die, and Leah had done the same. That deserved protection. No bargain, no chain, no price. The procedure was scheduled for the following week. Leah cried after Mateo fell asleep, but this time she did not do it in the bathroom. She sat at the kitchen table with her face in her hands, and Dante sat across from her without touching her, without trying to fix the moment with grand promises. He simply stayed. For Leah, who had carried everything alone for so long that loneliness felt like weather, his quiet presence was almost too much to bear. The search for proof began in the hotel records. Leah had not been only a server. Before life turned narrow, before hospital bills and rent and exhaustion, she had studied data management at community college, with dreams of working in systems, maybe running operations for a real company someday. She had loved patterns, clean rows, hidden links, the little truth that numbers revealed when people thought nobody was looking. At the Grand Aurelia, she had often helped the event office when their staff fell behind. She had seen invoices, donor forms, room charges, vendor accounts and foundation payments pass across desks, while managers treated her like furniture. Victor's private foundation had hosted 3 events there in 2 years. Leah remembered the strange details others ignored because poor people are trained to notice what powerful people forget to hide. Dante brought in old statements, hotel files, donor lists, and shell company names. Leah sat beside him at the laundromat apartment table until late night blurred into early morning. Mateo slept in the bedroom with a new medical monitor beside him, its soft green light blinking through the dark. Dante's men wanted to move them somewhere safer, but Leah refused until the procedure. Dante did not like it. For once, he listened anyway. The pattern appeared slowly, then all at once, fake donations moved through Victor's foundation, then split into smaller payments. Some went to officials, some went to police. Some went to accounts tied to men who had recently stopped answering Dante's calls. Leah found repeated hotel charges under one donor name that matched a room booked years earlier. On the same week, Dante's sister died. Her hands went cold as she traced the final transfer. It was small compared to the others, almost hidden. But it led to a private security contractor, and from there to a safe house address that had been leaked on the exact day Elena was taken. Dante did not speak when Leah showed him. He only stared at the screen. The apartment seemed to hold its breath around him. "I am sorry," Leah whispered. Dante's hand rested on the table, open and still. Leah looked at it for a long moment before she placed her fingers over his. She expected him to pull away. Instead, his hand closed around hers, carefully at first, then with quiet desperation. His face remained hard, but his grief moved through his grip like something alive. "Victor did not just betray you now," she said softly. "No," Dante said. "He made me into the man he needed me to be." The next day, they returned to the hotel through the service entrance to copy one final set of records from the event office archive. It was reckless, but Dante needed original files, not just digital copies Victor could claim were forged. Leah knew the route. Dante knew the risk. They went during a shift change, dressed as maintenance staff, with caps low and badges borrowed from someone Dante trusted. For a while, it worked. They moved through the back corridors like ghosts, past laundry bins, food carts, and staff who were too busy to notice them. Leah's hands shook as she unlocked the archive cabinet with a code she had watched an assistant manager use 100 times. Dante stood behind her, scanning the hall. They found the donor files in a blue storage box on the bottom shelf. Leah copied what she could, then slid the originals into a plain folder beneath her jacket. That was when the lights flickered. Dante turned toward the hallway. "Leah," he said softly, "move." The first gunshot cracked against the doorframe before she could ask why. Dante pulled her down behind a metal desk, his body covering hers as glass shattered above them. Men shouted in the corridor. Leah clutched the folder to her chest, so hard the papers bent. Dante returned fire only twice, calm and precise, then pulled her toward the back exit of the archive room. They ran through a narrow service passage that smelled of dust and old carpet glue, down a stairwell, past roaring machines and steam pipes. Leah's lungs burned. Her legs screamed. Fear made the hotel endless. Behind them, footsteps thundered closer. The underground service tunnels beneath the Grand Aurelia were older than the hotel's polished face. Built for deliveries, trash removal, and quiet exits powerful guests never wanted listed. Leah had used them only once during a kitchen flood, but she remembered enough. Left at the boiler room, right past the old wine storage, down the ramp with the broken yellow rail. Dante stayed beside her, one hand at her back, not pushing, not dragging, just there. When a man appeared at the end of the tunnel, Dante stepped in front of Leah so fast she barely saw him move. The fight was brief, brutal, and mostly shadow. Leah kept running when Dante told her to run, even though every instinct screamed to look back. By the time they burst out near the old loading dock, rain had started again. Nico Bell was waiting in a black car with the engine on. He was lean, gray-eyed, and scarred across one cheek, a man who looked like he had been living in hiding, with one hand on a weapon for years. Dante got Leah into the back seat first, then slid in beside her as Nico drove hard into the wet night. "You were right about Victor," Nico said. Dante looked down at the folder in Leah's hands. No, she was. Nico glanced at her through the mirror. "Then I guess the city owes you, Miss Moreno." Leah held the evidence tighter and looked out at the hotel shrinking behind them. "The city does not owe me anything," she said. "I just want my nephew to live." The tribunal was set for the same day as Mateo's procedure. Leah hated the timing with a bitterness she could taste. Dante tried to tell her he could delay one or the other, but there was no delaying a child's failing heart, and Victor had already called the old families together for a memorial dinner meant to crown himself as the steady hand after Dante's so-called disappearance. If Dante missed it completely, Victor would take control of the empire before nightfall. If Dante went, Leah would be alone at the hospital, waiting for the most important news of her life. "I will be fine," she told him in the hospital hallway, though her voice was thin. Dante looked at Mateo through the glass. The boy was in the bed, small beneath the blanket, holding his toy train with both hands. Dante had brought him a new one that morning, a silver mountain engine with blue windows, but Mateo still kept the old chipped train close. Dante turned back to Leah. "I put men on every entrance. No one gets near this floor without my approval." Leah nodded. She wanted to thank him. She wanted to tell him she was scared. She wanted to tell him that somewhere between the rain, the records, the couch, and the way he listened when Mateo spoke, he had stopped being only the dangerous man she had saved. But the words were too large for the hallway. Dante seemed to understand anyway. He touched her cheek with the backs of his fingers, so gentle it almost undid her. "I will come back," he said. "You have an empire to save." His eyes held hers. "I know what I have to save." Then he left. Mateo was taken into surgery just after noon. Leah sat in the waiting room with her hands clasped so tightly her fingers hurt. Minutes became hours. Every time a door opened, her heart jumped. Every time a doctor passed without stopping, she forgot how to breathe. Outside, thunder rolled softly over the city, and the hospital windows reflected her tired face back at her. She looked older than she was, round cheeks pale, hair pulled back too tightly, uniform replaced by a borrowed sweater Dante's men had brought, because her own clothes still smelled like hotel dust and rain. She wondered when she had last slept. She wondered how many prayers a person could say before God became tired of hearing the same name. Then Victor arrived. He stepped out of the elevator alone, wearing a dark suit and a calm smile. For a moment, no one moved. The guards near the nurses' station reached beneath their jackets, but Victor lifted both hands slightly. "Relax," he said. "Hospitals make everyone dramatic." Leah stood. Her fear was real, sharp and cold, but she did not let him see it take her. "You should leave." Victor smiled. "You should have taken my offer. There are guards here." "Yes," Victor said, glancing at them. "Dante's guards. Which means Dante left you here because he believed fear could be managed with men at doors. That has always been his mistake. He protects places. I study people." Leah's stomach twisted. "You cannot have him." "I do not need him," Victor said. "I need Dante to choose. His empire or you. Power or softness. He failed that test with Elena. I wonder if he will fail it again." Before Leah could answer, one of the elevator doors opened behind Victor. More men stepped out, dressed like hospital staff, but their shoes were wrong and their eyes were too alert. Dante's guards moved at once. The hallway erupted into chaos, but Leah did not run. She backed toward the surgical waiting room door, keeping herself between Victor and the hallway that led to Mateo. Victor watched her and laughed softly. "Look at you," he said. "A banquet server playing queen." Leah lifted her chin. "Better than a coward playing loyal friend." The smile left his face. That was when Dante appeared at the far end of the hall. He had not come with an army. He had come like a man who had torn himself away from history because the present mattered more. His coat was wet from rain. His face was hard, his eyes fixed on Victor with a kind of fury so controlled it barely looked human. Nico was beside him with two men Leah recognized from the laundromat watch. The hospital guards moved in behind Victor's fake staff, closing the trap Dante had already set. Victor looked almost pleased. "You came back." Dante did not look at him. His eyes went to Leah first, scanning her face, her hands, the space around her. Only after he knew she was unharmed did he turn to Victor. "I did." "Then you missed the tribunal," Victor said. "They are waiting for me now. No, Dante said. They are waiting for the truth. Victor's confidence flickered. Nico stepped forward, holding up a phone. The gathering had been delayed. Every old boss in that room had already received copies of the foundation records, the hotel files, the police payments, the transfer tied to Elena's location. Dante had not abandoned the tribunal. He had moved it around Victor without letting him know. For the first time, Victor Sable looked afraid. The confrontation that followed did not belong to Leah. It belonged to men who had built their lives on silence and power, to old families who cared less about goodness than betrayal, less about mercy than order. Dante brought Victor to the memorial dinner not as a rival, but as evidence. Leah was not there to see the long table go quiet when the records were placed before them. She did not see Victor's denials shrink under the weight of his own accounts. She did not hear the old bosses turn away from him one by one, disgusted not because he was cruel, but because he had been faithless. Nico told her later that Dante spoke only once about Elena, and when he did, every man in the room lowered his eyes. Victor Sable's power ended that night beneath chandeliers and old portraits, destroyed not by bullets, but by the papers a hotel server had refused to drop in a service tunnel. Dante did not stay to enjoy the victory. He returned to the hospital before the doctor came out. Leah was standing by then, unable to sit any longer. Her whole body felt hollow with waiting. When she saw Dante step into the room, alive and breathing and looking only at her, something inside her gave way. She crossed the space between them without thinking. He caught her carefully, his arms closing around her as if she were something precious and breakable, though Leah had never been treated like either before. "Did you win?" she whispered. Dante held her tighter. "We did." Before she could answer, the surgical doors opened. The doctor stepped out in blue scrubs, mask hanging loose around her neck. Leah pulled away from Dante so fast she nearly stumbled. The doctor smiled, tired but real. "Mateo did well," she said. "The procedure was successful. We still have recovery ahead, but his heart responded beautifully." Leah made a sound that was not quite a sob and not quite a laugh. Her knees weakened. Dante caught her again before she hit the floor, and this time Leah did not pull away. She turned into his chest and cried with the full weight of every night she had been strong, because there had been no other choice. Dante held her in the middle of the waiting room while rain softened against the windows. He did not tell her to stop. He did not tell her she was safe, as if words could make it true. He simply held her until she believed she did not have to carry the whole world alone. The weeks after that were quiet in a way Leah did not trust at first. Quiet had always been the pause before the next bill, the next fever, the next cruel surprise. But this quiet stayed. Mateo recovered slowly, then steadily. Color returned to his face. His laugh grew stronger. He began walking the hospital hallway, with Leah on one side and Dante on the other, pretending the tile lines were train tracks. The nurses whispered about Dante, of course. Everyone did. But Mateo only knew him as the serious man who brought train books, listened to long stories about mountain tunnels, and never once looked bored. Leah and Mateo moved out of the apartment above the laundromat, though Leah cried the day they left because it had been small and tired and theirs. Dante found them a safe home with sunlight, a real bedroom for Mateo, and a kitchen where Leah could turn around without bumping into the refrigerator. She told him she would pay him back. He told her she could try for the next 100 years if it made her feel better. She enrolled in classes again, data management at first, then financial systems, then foundation compliance, because she had learned exactly how much darkness could hide in clean paperwork. Dante did not ask her to become part of his empire. That was what surprised her most. He gave her room to choose. He protected without trapping. He listened when she said no. And slowly, because trust is not a door but a road, Leah began to walk toward him. Dante changed too, though not in ways the city could easily see. To his enemies, he remained Dante Rourke, calm, dangerous, impossible to corner. But to Mateo, he became the man who knew how to build wooden tracks across the living room. To Leah, he became the man who woke from nightmares and let her touch his hand after, the man who spoke about Elena without turning grief into ice, the man who looked at Leah's soft body not like it was something to overlook or forgive, but like it was part of the home he had never known how to want. He never made her feel small for taking up space. He made space around her, and somehow that was more intimate than any promise. Months later, when Mateo was strong enough, Dante arranged the train ride. Not a private jet, not a black car, not some grand display of money trying to replace a dream. A train, a real one, with wide windows and blue seats, and a route that climbed toward the mountains as morning light spilled over the world. Mateo pressed his face to the glass, laughing every time the tracks curved along the river. Leah sat across from him, watching his reflection in the window, healthy and bright-eyed, his little hands wrapped around the silver train Dante had given him. Dante stood beside Leah in the aisle for a while, before sitting next to her. Outside, the city fell away. Buildings became fields. Fields became hills. Far ahead, the mountains rose soft and blue beneath the clouds. Leah looked at Dante and saw the man people whispered about. Yes, the danger was still there. It would always be there. But she also saw the wounded stranger on her couch, the man holding a child's toy like it might save him, the brother who had lost too much, the king who had regained an empire and still chosen to come back to a hospital waiting room. Mateo shouted from the window that the mountains looked like giants sleeping under blankets. Leah laughed, and the sound surprised her with how light it was. Dante reached for her hand. He did not take it like he owned it. He waited. Leah looked down at his open palm, then placed her hand in his. For so long, the world had treated her kindness like weakness. It had called her body a burden, her softness a flaw, her quiet survival something ordinary and forgettable. But Leah knew the truth now. Her kindness had carried a dying man through a storm. Her courage had stood against an offer that could have broken her. Her mind had found the truth hidden beneath money and lies. Her love had kept Mateo alive long enough to see the mountains. Dante leaned close, his voice low enough for only her to hear. "You gave me back my heart, Leah." She looked at Mateo laughing in the sunlight, then at the mountains waiting beyond the glass, and finally at the dangerous man beside her, who had learned, slowly and painfully, how to be gentle. "No," she whispered, "I think you still had it. You just forgot where you buried it." Dante smiled then, not the cold smile of a feared boss, not the sharp smile of a man planning revenge, but something small and real, and almost boyish. Leah rested her head against his shoulder as the train carried them higher, away from the smoke of the city and into the bright quiet Mateo had dreamed of for so long. Dante had reclaimed his empire, but Leah had claimed something greater. She had claimed the right to be seen, to be loved, to be safe without becoming hard, and to believe that even after the darkest night, a life could still open like a window toward the mountains. Poison did not always arrive with a skull on the bottle or a bitter taste on the tongue. Sometimes it hid beneath butter, garlic, and expensive white wine, tucked inside a perfect sauce meant for the most feared man in the city. Sometimes death wore a clean black vest, carried a silver tray, and smiled like a servant who belonged in the room. And sometimes the only person who could see it coming was the woman everyone had laughed at 5 minutes earlier. Beatrice Vale stood behind the swinging kitchen doors of Dante Moretti's mansion, her hands still dusted with flour, her heart beating so hard she could feel it in her throat. Across the grand dining room, beneath crystal chandeliers and soft golden light, Dante lifted his fork toward the dish she had prepared. Around him sat powerful men, polished women, and the family that had spent Beatrice's entire life making her feel too large, too clumsy, too embarrassing, and too easy to ignore. None of them smelled the danger. None of them saw the tiny shimmer in the sauce. None of them noticed the way the cream had separated just slightly at the edge of the plate. But Beatrice did. And in that breathless second before silver touched his mouth, she realized the night was not about an engagement party anymore. It was about whether she had the courage to save Dante Moretti for the second time. Long before she ever stepped into his mansion as a private chef, Beatrice had known what it felt like to be invisible in a crowded room. She was 29 years old, soft, round, and heavy in a way people always thought gave them permission to comment. Her mother called it concern. Her younger sister called it honesty. Her cousins called it a joke. But Beatrice had learned early that cruelty sounded the same, no matter how gently people dressed it. At family dinners, someone always watched her plate. At birthdays, someone always mentioned a diet. At weddings, someone always asked if she had tried walking more. And when Beatrice smiled through it, because that was easier than fighting, they decided she was simple, kind, useful. The kind of woman who would cook, clean, arrange flowers, fix broken things, and never ask to be seen. But Beatrice was not simple. She had once spent long nights inside the humming back rooms of a chemical processing plant, wearing goggles and gloves, learning how substances changed when heated, mixed, diluted, or hidden under stronger smells. She knew the sharpness of solvents, the sweetness of certain toxins, the metallic bite of industrial cleaners, and the strange way some compounds clung to oil instead of water. She had not planned to work there forever. It had been a job she took when culinary school felt too expensive and her family told her dreams were for prettier girls. But Beatrice had paid attention. She always paid attention. While others rushed through safety labels and storage logs, she memorized reactions. While supervisors ignored small changes in color or texture, she noticed them. That skill had saved her once, and years ago, on a cold winter evening inside a private dining room in the city, it had saved Dante Moretti. Back then, she had not known his name at first. She only knew that a wealthy client had rented the upper floor of a restaurant where she was working temporary prep. The kitchen had been nervous all night. Men with dark coats and quiet eyes stood near every exit. The head chef barked orders with a fear he tried to hide. Beatrice had been assigned to sauces because nobody wanted her in view of the guests. It was always the same. Her food could impress people, but her body, they decided, should stay behind the wall. She remembered stirring a glossy reduction for the main course when something in the steam made her pause. It was faint, almost buried beneath wine and rosemary, but she caught it, a soft chemical sweetness that did not belong. She'd stopped the plate before it left the kitchen, grabbed it from a furious waiter, and forced the chef to smell it again. He yelled. The waiter cursed. Someone threatened to fire her. Then one of the men in dark coats took the plate away. And 10 minutes later, the whole building went silent. Beatrice never saw the client's face clearly. She only saw him from across the kitchen for half a second, tall, still, and frighteningly calm while his men dragged someone out through the back exit. The next morning, an envelope with $5,000 appeared in her locker. No note, no name, just cash. She used it to finally leave the plant behind and start training as a chef for real. Years passed, but Beatrice never forgot that night. She told herself the man had probably forgotten her before his car even turned the corner. Men like that did not remember women like her. They remembered enemies, debts, betrayals, and beautiful women in red dresses. They did not remember the fat prep cook who ruined a sauce and then disappeared. So when the call came from Moretti House requesting a private chef for an engagement party, Beatrice did not connect the name at first. Moretti was spoken in the city the way people spoke of storms. Quietly, carefully. Everyone knew Dante Moretti owned nightclubs, restaurants, construction firms, hotels, and pieces of things nobody could prove. Everyone also knew that men who crossed him tended to leave town or stop being discussed. But the pay was too good to refuse, and Beatrice's catering business was still young enough that one grand event could change everything. Then she learned whose engagement party it was. Her sister Marissa. Beautiful Marissa, with her perfect smile, delicate wrists, and gift for turning every room into a mirror that reflected only her. Marissa was marrying Nathan Bellamy, the son of a wealthy real estate developer who liked to stand near dangerous men and pretend that made him powerful too. Their engagement dinner was being held inside Dante Moretti's mansion because Nathan's father wanted to impress investors, allies, and people with last names that opened locked doors. Beatrice's family had not told her at first. They simply asked if she was free to cater a luxury dinner. Her mother said it would be good exposure. Her sister said it would be a chance for Beatrice to be useful. No one mentioned that Beatrice would be cooking while the rest of them sat beneath chandeliers, dressed in silk, smiling for photos as if they had always belonged there. The mansion rose at the edge of the city behind iron gates and tall black trees. It did not look like a home. It looked like a secret built from stone. Warm light glowed behind high windows. Guards moved along the driveway with the quiet discipline of men who had seen violence and were not afraid of it. Beatrice arrived through the service entrance with boxes of produce, fresh herbs, imported cheeses, and the quiet ache of knowing her family was somewhere inside, pretending she was not one of them. She wore a clean black chef's coat, her dark hair pinned back, her cheeks flushed from the cold. The coat fit snugly over her full arms and soft stomach, but it was hers, and for once she refused to hide beneath something shapeless. In the kitchen she became different, calm, certain. The world could laugh at her body, but it could not argue with her hands. Her hands knew how to fold butter into dough, how to balance salt against acid, how to coax sweetness from onions, how to turn simple food into memory. The staff watched her with polite doubt at first. They saw her size before they saw her skill. Beatrice felt it, the quick glance, the silent question, the low expectations. But by the time the first course was plated, nobody doubted her anymore. The kitchen smelled of roasted garlic, lemon-browned butter, and fresh bread. Her soup went out smooth as velvet. Her handmade pasta held its shape perfectly. Her fish came back with plates wiped clean. Even the head of house, a severe older woman named Elena, studied one empty dish and gave Beatrice a small nod that felt like a medal. For a little while, hidden in the heat of the kitchen, Beatrice almost forgot the ache waiting beyond the swinging doors. Then her mother came in. Lorraine Vale swept into the kitchen, wearing silver satin and disappointment. She looked around as if the copper pans and polished counters were proof that Beatrice had accepted her proper place in life. Behind her came Marissa, glowing in pale pink, her engagement ring flashing under the kitchen lights. Beatrice's younger sister looked beautiful, of course. She always did. Soft curls, perfect makeup, a waist their mother loved to praise, and the kind of fragile prettiness that made strangers want to protect her. Marissa wrinkled her nose at the steam rising from the stove and smiled at Beatrice with that familiar sweetness that always hid a blade. "There you are," Marissa said, as if Beatrice had been missing instead of working. "Everyone is asking who made the food. I told them it was just a small catering team." Beatrice kept stirring the sauce. "It is my catering team." Her mother gave a tight laugh. "Don't be sensitive tonight, Bea. This is Marissa's evening. We cannot have drama." Drama. That was what they called it whenever Beatrice had a feeling. Drama when she cried. Drama when she asked not to be mocked. Drama when she said she was tired of being treated like an unpaid servant with a bank account and a stove. She lowered the heat beneath the pan and turned around slowly. "I'm doing the job you asked me to do, and we appreciate it," Lorraine said, though her eyes moved over Beatrice's body with the old familiar sigh. "But please stay in the kitchen as much as possible. Nathan's family has very refined guests tonight. You know how people can be." Beatrice felt the words land deep, but she did not let them show. "How can people be, Mom?" Marissa stepped forward quickly, smiling as if she were being kind. "She means people judge, and you know this crowd. They care about image. You're amazing with food, Bah. Really. But maybe don't come out unless someone asks for the chef, and if they do, just keep it quick." For a moment the kitchen sounds faded, the clatter of pans, the hiss of steam, the distant music from the dining room. All of it dropped behind the slow pulse in Beatrice's ears. She looked at her sister, then at her mother, and wondered how many times a heart could break over the same wound before it stopped making noise. She wanted to say she belonged at that dinner more than half the guests. She wanted to say her work was the reason the evening felt elegant at all. She wanted to say that being fat did not make her a stain on the family. But years of swallowing words had trained her too well, so she only nodded once and turned back to her sauce. Lorraine seemed relieved. Marissa touched her shoulder lightly, the way someone might touch a chair they were about to move. "Thank you, and please don't make that face. You know we love you." They left before Beatrice could answer. The next hour passed in a rhythm of plates and orders. Through the narrow gap of the swinging doors, Beatrice saw pieces of the world she had been asked not to enter. Her father laughing too loudly with Nathan's parents. Her mother lifting a champagne glass. Marissa leaning into her fiancé while guests admired the ring. And at the head of the long dining table sat Dante Moretti. Beatrice saw him clearly for the first time when Elena asked her to check the timing on the main course. He was dressed in a black suit that looked simple until the light touched it and revealed its perfection. He did not speak much. He did not need to. The room bent around him anyway. Men leaned closer when he talked. Women watched him when they thought no one noticed. Nathan's father laughed too eagerly at every quiet remark. Dante had the stillness of a man who had survived things other people were too afraid to imagine. But it was not his power that made Beatrice's breath catch. It was the strange pull of recognition in her chest, the memory of a winter dining room, a poisoned sauce and an envelope in a locker. It was him. Of course it was him. She stepped back from the door, pressing one hand to her stomach. Dante Moretti was the man she had saved years ago, the man who had unknowingly paid for the beginning of her real life, the man who had never seen her face long enough to remember it. For one foolish second, Beatrice let herself wonder what would happen if he did. Then she almost laughed at herself. A man like Dante did not carry soft memories of kitchen girls. He carried scars, warnings, and names written in blood. Near the dining room entrance, a new guest arrived with two men at his back. The air changed before anyone introduced him. Beatrice felt it from the kitchen. The way conversation softened, the way Dante's guards shifted slightly, the way Elena's face tightened. The man was older than Dante, silver-haired and smooth, with a warm smile that did not reach his eyes. He embraced Nathan's father like an old friend and lifted his glass toward Dante with practiced respect. "Who is that?" Beatrice asked quietly. Elena did not look away from the dining room. "Victor Sorrento." He smiles before he cuts. The name meant nothing to Beatrice, but the warning in Elena's voice did. Victor crossed the room with easy charm, greeting guests, kissing hands, laughing softly. Yet every movement felt measured, too measured. Beatrice had worked enough private events to know the difference between confident performance. Victor was performing for everyone except Dante. With Dante, his smile became careful. At the same time, a young server Beatrice did not recognize entered the kitchen carrying a stack of clean plates. He wore the same black uniform as the rest of the event staff, but something about him was wrong. His shoes were too new. His sleeves sat too stiff on his arms. He did not ask where anything belonged. He moved as if he had memorized the room instead of worked in it. When his gaze passed over Beatrice, it did not dismiss her the way most people did. It measured her, quickly. Then he looked away. A small unease opened inside her. Beatrice told herself she was tired. Her family had upset her. Dante's presence had shaken loose an old memory. Not every strange man in a mansion was dangerous, even if the mansion belonged to Dante Moretti. Still, she watched the server when she could. She saw him near the wine station, then near the silverware, then beside the service cart for the main course, where Dante's plate waited beneath a silver dome. The main dish was Beatrice's proudest work of the night, slow-roasted sea bass with saffron cream, fennel, and a delicate herb oil that had taken her 3 tries to perfect. Each plate had been finished by her own hand. She knew the sauce. She knew its color, its shine, its smell. But when she lifted Dante's dome for one final check, the world narrowed. Something was wrong. The surface of the saffron cream had changed, just slightly. The shine was thinner near the edge, almost glassy. The scent beneath the fennel was not strong. It was not obvious. It hid under butter and wine like a whisper under music. But Beatrice smelled it, and suddenly she was back in a different kitchen years ago, holding another plate, while people yelled around her. Her fingers went cold. The strange server appeared beside her. "That one is ready," looked at him. His face was calm. Too calm. "No," she said softly. "It isn't." His eyes changed, only for a second, but she saw it. The mask slipped, and behind it was not confusion or irritation. It was calculation. Beatrice reached for the plate, but the server moved first, sliding it onto the tray with smooth, practiced speed. "I'll take it out," he said. Beatrice grabbed the edge of the tray. I said no. The kitchen seemed to pause around them. The server leaned closer, his voice barely above a breath. "Let go." Fear moved through Beatrice, cold and sharp, but beneath it came something stronger. Anger. All her life, people had mistaken her softness for weakness. They saw her body and thought she would move aside. They heard her quiet voice and thought she would obey. This man had made the same mistake. Before she could pull the tray back, Marissa appeared in the kitchen doorway with a bright, embarrassed smile. "Bae, what are you doing?" "Everyone is waiting." "There's something wrong with Dante's plate," Beatrice said. Marissa's smile froze. Behind her, Lorraine appeared, already horrified by the possibility of attention. "Not now," her mother whispered. "Do not embarrass us." The server slipped the tray free while Beatrice's family crowded the doorway. Beatrice turned, panic rising as he walked into the dining room with Dante's poisoned dish balanced perfectly in his hands. The room beyond the doors glittered with candlelight, laughter, diamonds, and danger. Dante Moretti sat at the head of the table, unaware that death was moving toward him beneath a silver dome. Beatrice did not think. She pushed past her sister, past her mother, past every old voice that had ever told her to stay hidden, and stepped into the dining room. Every head turned. Her family's shame hit her like heat. Guests stared at her chef's coat, her flushed face, her large body, her hands still stained with saffron. Someone laughed softly, someone whispered. Marissa hissed her name, but Beatrice barely heard it. She saw only the plate being set in front of Dante. She saw Victor Sorrento watching from across the table with a smile as thin as a knife. She saw Dante pick up his fork. And Beatrice Vale, the woman everyone thought was too useless to belong in the room, opened her mouth and spoke with every ounce of courage she had left. "Don't eat that." For one long second, Beatrice's warning seemed to float above the table like smoke from a candle. Dante Moretti's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. The dining room went silent, not because anyone believed her, but because no one knew what to do when the fat chef from the kitchen stepped into the light and gave an order to the most feared man in the city. Beatrice felt every stare land on her body. She felt her mother's horror, her sister's shame, Nathan's confusion, and the cold amusement of guests who thought a woman like her had forgotten her place. The server stood beside Dante's chair with his hand still near the plate, his face blank, but Beatrice saw the tiny tightening at the corner of his mouth. Victor Sorrento sat across the table with his wine glass lifted, smiling as if the whole moment had been arranged for his entertainment. Marissa was the first one to speak. Her voice came out soft and sharp at the same time, the way it always did when she wanted to sound kind in public and cruel in private. "Bae, please don't do this right now." She pushed her chair back and gave the guests an embarrassed smile. "I'm so sorry. My sister gets nervous around important people." A few people laughed under their breath. Beatrice's cheeks burned, but she did not move. Her eyes stayed locked on Dante's plate. The sauce looked beautiful to anyone else. Pale gold, smooth, expensive, touched with green oil and fennel. But she saw the break in the cream. She saw how the shine gathered strangely near the edge. She smelled the soft chemical sweetness under the butter. It was faint, but it was there. It did not belong in food. It belonged in a sealed container with warning labels and locked cabinets. Dante did not eat. He slowly lowered his fork and looked at Beatrice. His gaze was steady, dark, and unreadable. She expected irritation. She expected him to order her removed. Instead, his eyes moved across her face with a strange, searching focus. It was as if he had heard a voice from a memory and was trying to place it. Beatrice's pulse stumbled. For a breath, the room disappeared, and it was only him looking at her across years of silence. Then Nathan's father gave a loud, nervous laugh and broke the spell. "Mr. Moretti, forgive her. She is the chef. Very talented in the kitchen, obviously, but not used to this kind of formal evening." Lorraine stood near the doorway, pale with anger. "Beatrice, apologize at once." Beatrice swallowed. Her hands trembled at her sides, but her voice stayed clear. "There is something in that sauce." The disguised server moved too quickly. It was almost nothing. Just the smallest shift of his shoulder toward the tray, but Dante's guard noticed it at the same time Beatrice did. One of the men by the wall stepped forward. The server's hand went under his jacket. Beatrice's heart kicked hard against her ribs. "Knife," she said, but the word had barely left her mouth before the room exploded into motion. Dante's guard grabbed the server's wrist and twisted it behind his back. A thin blade slipped from the man's sleeve and clattered against the marble floor. Women screamed. Chairs scraped backward. Nathan nearly knocked over his own glass as he stood too fast. Marissa clutched her fiancé's arm, suddenly too frightened to pretend Beatrice was only being dramatic. Dante remained seated. That was the terrifying part. He did not jump, flinch, or shout. He only looked at the blade on the floor, then at the man who had carried his plate, then at Beatrice. The calm on his face made the room colder. His guard forced the server down onto his knees beside the table. Another man pulled open the fake server's jacket and found a small vial tucked into the inner pocket, wrapped in a folded napkin from the kitchen station. Beatrice saw it and felt her stomach twist. The liquid inside was clear with the faintest yellow tint. She knew enough to understand that whoever planned this had expected the poison to hide inside fat and cream. They had chosen her own sauce as the mask. Victor Sorrento set down his wineglass with a quiet click. "This is unpleasant," he said softly. "Dante, it seems your house has become careless." Dante's eyes did not leave Beatrice. "What is in the plate?" The question was not for Victor. It was for her. Beatrice forced herself to step closer, even though her mother whispered her name like a warning. She stopped beside Dante's chair but did not touch the dish. "I can't name it without testing," she said. "But it behaves like an organophosphate compound or something designed to act like one. It clings to fat. That is why they put it in the cream. Heat changed the texture, and the smell is wrong. It is sweet in a chemical way. Not sugar, not wine, not saffron." Her voice grew stronger as she spoke, because knowledge had always been the one place where shame could not follow her. "If you eat enough, it may not kill you immediately. It might look like a seizure, a heart attack, maybe an allergic reaction. People would panic. They would blame the kitchen. They might blame me." The last sentence settled over the room. Dante finally stood. The simple movement changed everything. Every guest seemed to shrink as he rose to his full height. The warmth of the chandeliers did nothing to soften him. He looked carved from shadow and control. "Bring me the silver spoon," he said. One of his men obeyed. Dante took the spoon, dipped only the tip into the sauce, then held it over the small vial taken from the assassin's pocket. The two liquids touched. A faint cloudy thread spread through the cream almost instantly, thin and gray, like smoke trapped under glass. Beatrice heard Elena gasp behind her. Dante watched the reaction for a moment, then set the spoon down. The room went deathly quiet. Dante turned to the man on his knees. "Who sent you?" The assassin said nothing. His jaw clenched, sweat gathered near his hairline, but he kept his mouth shut. Dante's expression did not change. "You came into my home, you wore my staff's uniform. You carried death to my table during a family celebration." His voice stayed low, almost gentle, and that made it more frightening. "You will speak eventually. The only question is how much you will suffer before you do." Beatrice looked away, her breath unsteady. She did not like violence. She did not like threats. But she also knew what would have happened if she had stayed in the kitchen. If she had obeyed her mother, if she had let shame keep her silent. Dante would be dying. Her name would be ruined. The assassin would have vanished through the service hall. And Victor Sorrento would still be sitting there with that smooth, patient smile. Dante looked toward Victor then, as if he had heard her thought. "You arrived with 2 men, I see only 1 now." Victor gave a faint smile. "Parties are crowded. Perhaps your guards should keep better count. Before Dante could answer, Beatrice noticed something on Victor's cuff. A trace of pale yellow powder near the seam. It was almost invisible against the white fabric, but the dining room light caught it. Her eyes narrowed. In the kitchen, the vial had been wrapped in a napkin. In the dish, the poison had been mixed too cleanly for a nervous assassin working alone. Someone had handled the compound before it reached the plate. Someone who knew how little was needed. Someone careful enough to stay away from the kitchen, but close enough to direct the timing. His cuff, Beatrice whispered. Dante turned slightly toward her. What? Beatrice's throat tightened, but she lifted her chin toward Victor. There is residue on his right cuff. Near the button. It matches the color on the vial cap. The room shifted again, this time with disbelief sharper than before. Victor looked down at his sleeve, and for the first time all night, his smile weakened. It lasted only a second, but Dante saw it. So did everyone else. Victor laughed softly. This is absurd. You are trusting the word of a kitchen woman because she smelled butter too closely? Lorraine stepped forward quickly, desperate to repair what she thought was damage. Mr. Sorrentos, please forgive her. Beatrice has always had a habit of making herself important when she feels ignored. Beatrice flinched, even though she hated herself for it. Her mother had chosen the worst possible moment to wound her, and somehow it still hurt. Around the table, a few guests looked down, uncomfortable now. Marissa stared at Beatrice with wide eyes, caught between fear and humiliation. Nathan's father tried to smile, but his face had gone gray. Dante's head turned slowly toward Lorraine. What did you say? Lorraine froze. I only meant that she sometimes exaggerates. She is a good cook, of course, but she has always been sensitive about attention. Dante stepped away from the table. The guards moved aside without being told. He walked toward Beatrice's mother with a silence that felt heavier than shouting. Lorraine seemed to shrink inside her silver satin dress. Dante stopped in front of her and spoke so softly that everyone leaned in to hear. Your daughter just stopped me from eating poison in my own home. She exposed a hidden blade, a false servant, and a man who came here pretending friendship while carrying murder on his sleeve. And your first instinct was to shame her. Lorraine's mouth opened, but no sound came. Dante looked at Marissa next, then at Beatrice's father, then at every relative seated near the center of the table. Is this how you treat her? No one answered. Beatrice wished the floor would open beneath her. Not because she was guilty, but because being defended in front of her family felt almost more painful than being mocked. She had spent so many years surviving their small cuts that seeing them named out loud made the wounds feel fresh again. It's fine, she whispered. I'm used to it. Dante turned back to her, and something dark moved through his face. Not anger at her. Anger for her. You should not have had to become used to it. The words were simple, but they struck Beatrice deeper than any compliment could have. Her eyes burned. She looked away before the tears could fall. Victor pushed back from the table. This sentimental little performance is touching, Dante, but you are making an enemy of the wrong man. Dante smiled then, but there was no warmth in it. No, Victor, I am finally looking at the right one. The guards moved at once. Victor's remaining man reached for his weapon, but Dante's people were faster. The dining room filled with the hard sound of bodies being seized, weapons being taken, orders being carried out in quiet voices. No wild gunfire, no chaos, just control. Victor was forced to his feet, his expensive mask finally cracking, as Dante's men found a second vial hidden inside his jacket lining and a small transmitter taped beneath his watch. The assassin on the floor lowered his head. That single movement told the room everything. Victor's eyes burned with hatred. You think she saved you? She has made herself a target. You cannot watch her forever. Dante stepped close to him. I do not need forever to end you. Beatrice's breath caught. Dante gave one small nod, and Victor was taken from the room with the assassin. Their footsteps faded down the hall, swallowed by the mansion's long stone corridors. The guests sat frozen in the aftermath, surrounded by cooling food, spilled wine, and the terrible understanding that they had come to celebrate an engagement, and nearly witnessed an execution by poison. Dante turned back to Beatrice. The danger in him softened, not into weakness, but into something focused and almost reverent. "Beatrice Vale," he said, as if tasting the name after years of keeping it in silence. She stared at him. "You know my name? I have known your name for 6 years." The room seemed to tilt. Beatrice blinked. "That's not possible." Dante took one step closer. A winter dinner. A private room above a restaurant. Rosemary wine reduction. A plate you refused to let leave the kitchen even while everyone shouted at you. His eyes held hers. "You saved my life that night." A soft sound moved through the guests. Marissa covered her mouth. Lorraine looked as if someone had pulled the world out from under her. Beatrice could barely breathe. "You remember?" Dante's voice dropped. "I remember everything. I remember the way you stood between me and death without knowing who I was. I remember trying to find you afterward. By the time my men learned your full name, you had left the restaurant and the chemical plant. I sent the money because it was the only way I could thank you without dragging you into my world." He paused, and for the first time the most feared man in the city looked almost regretful. "I told myself leaving you alone was mercy." Beatrice's heart twisted. The envelope, the cash, the new life she had built from it. All these years she had imagined a faceless thank you from some unknown rich man. She had never imagined Dante Moretti had remembered her, searched for her, protected her from a distance by staying away. Her mother whispered, "Bae, why didn't you tell us?" Beatrice slowly turned. The question was almost funny, almost cruel enough to make her laugh. "Would you have believed me?" Lorraine looked down. Marissa's eyes filled with tears, but Beatrice could not tell if they came from guilt, fear, or the sudden understanding that the sister she had hidden in the kitchen was the only reason the evening had not become a funeral. Dante faced the room. "Let every person here understand something clearly. Beatrice Vale is not kitchen help to be mocked. She is not an embarrassment. She is not a family joke. She is the woman who saw what trained men missed. She is the woman who saved my life twice." His voice hardened. "From this moment forward, anyone who disrespects her disrespects me." The words landed like a seal pressed into hot wax. Permanent, unmistakable. No one laughed now. No one whispered about Beatrice's body. No one looked at her like she was too big for the room. For the first time in her life, her family saw her standing beneath bright light. Not as something to hide, but as someone powerful enough to change the fate of everyone around her. Nathan's father stood shakily. "Mr. Moretti, perhaps we should continue the dinner somewhere else while your staff handles the matter." Dante looked at him with cold disbelief. "The dinner is over." Marissa made a small, broken sound. "But our engagement announcement." Dante's gaze moved to her. "Was hosted in my home, catered by your sister's hands, and nearly used as cover for my murder. I suggest gratitude before complaint." Marissa lowered her head. Beatrice should have felt satisfaction. She had dreamed of this small, ashamed ways. She had imagined her family finally being forced to see her, finally realizing she was not useless, finally hearing someone powerful say what she had never been able to make them believe. But now that it was happening, all she felt was tired. The kind of tired that came from carrying too much for too long. Dan seemed to notice. He stepped close enough that his voice became only for her. "Are you hurt?" The tenderness in the question nearly broke her. "No," she whispered. "Just shaken. You were brave." "I was terrified. Bravery usually is." She looked up at him, and for the first time she allowed herself to really see the man, not the legend, not the crime boss, not the shadow people feared. She saw the man who remembered a kitchen girl. The man who had stayed away because he thought distance was protection. The man who had lowered his fork because she told him to. "What happens now?" she asked. Danton's eyes moved briefly toward the doorway where Victor had been taken. "Now I clean my house. I find every hand Victor paid, every guard he studied, every route he touched, and then I make sure he never reaches for what is mine again." Beatrice stiffened slightly. "What is yours?" His gaze returned to her, steady and intense. "Your safety, your dignity, your peace. Anything more than that you will decide for yourself." The answer surprised her. She had expected possession, a command, a dark promise wrapped in control. Instead, Dante gave her something no one in her family ever had. choice behind them, Lorraine began to cry quietly. "Beatrice, sweetheart, I'm sorry. I didn't know." Beatrice turned, and the old version of herself wanted to comfort her mother. It rose automatically, that trained need to smooth things over, to make everyone else feel better, to forgive before anyone truly understood what they had done. But something had changed when she stepped into the dining room and told Dante not to eat. Maybe courage, once used, did not go back into hiding so easily. "You didn't know because you never asked," Beatrice said softly. "You never wanted to know who I was outside of what you could criticize or use." Lorraine covered her mouth. Marissa took a step forward. "Bae, please, I never meant to make you feel." "Yes," Beatrice said, her voice quiet but firm. "You did. All of you did. Maybe not every time, maybe not every word, but enough that I'd learned to stand in kitchens while my own family celebrated without me." No one answered. There was nothing to say. Dante signaled to Elena, who immediately began guiding the guests out with calm authority. One by one, the room emptied. Nathan's family left pale and silent. Marissa looked back at Beatrice once, but Beatrice did not move toward her. Lorraine reached as if to touch her daughter's arm, then stopped herself. For once, she seemed to understand that comfort was not something she could demand. When the last guest was gone, the mansion grew quiet. The long dining room looked almost dreamlike now, with half-burned candles, abandoned flowers, and plates no one would finish. Beatrice stood in the middle of it all, still wearing her chef's coat, still smelling of saffron and smoke, still trying to understand how one warning had changed the shape of her life. Dante walked to the poisoned plate, lifted it carefully with a cloth, and handed it to one of his men. "Full analysis. I want the compound, the supplier, the chain of access, and every camera angle from the kitchen." "Yes, boss." Then Dante turned to Beatrice. "You knew before anyone." She gave a tired little smile. "Food talks if you listen." His mouth curved slightly. "Then I need someone near me who knows how to listen." Beatrice's breath caught again. "Dante, I am not asking you to become part of anything tonight," he said. "You have had enough taken from you by people who thought love gave them permission. I will not add myself to that list." He stepped closer, slowly, giving her time to move away if she wanted. She did not. "But I am asking you to let me make sure you are safe. Victor knows your face now. So do people who will hear what happened here." Fear returned, softer, this time but real. "So I can't just go home?" "You can," Dante said. "But I would prefer to send guards with you, secure your apartment, and move your business accounts under protection until Victor's network is gone." Beatrice studied him. "You're asking?" Yes. The simple word did something dangerous to her heart. She had been ordered by family, judged by strangers, dismissed by guests, and threatened by a man pretending to be staff. But Dante Moretti, the man everyone feared, was asking. She nodded slowly. "All right." Relief moved through his face so quickly she almost missed it. "Thank you." Hours later, after statements had been taken, evidence sealed, and the mansion swept clean of danger, Beatrice found herself standing in the quiet kitchen where the night had begun. The ovens were off, the counters were clean, the staff had gone. Only one loaf of bread remained beneath a linen cloth, golden and untouched. She cut 2 slices, warmed them in a pan, and spread them with butter because her hands needed something ordinary to do. Dante appeared in the doorway, jacket gone, sleeves rolled to his forearms, his dark hair slightly disturbed for the first time all night. He looked less like a king and more like a man who had almost died and did not want to be alone with the thought of it. "You cooked after all that?" he asked. Beatrice placed 1 slice on a small plate and slid it toward him. "Bread helps." He accepted it with the seriousness of a vow. They ate in silence at the kitchen counter, 2 people who had survived the same poison twice, separated by years and brought together by the one skill no one had valued until it mattered. Outside, dawn began to pale the windows. The black trees around the mansion softened into gray. The city beyond them was still asleep, unaware that one of its quiet wars had ended before breakfast. Dante looked at the bread in his hand. The meal was excellent, by the way. Beatrice let out a small laugh, the first real one of the night. "You barely ate any of it. I trust the chef, not the guests." Her smile faded into something warmer, something braver, I spent a long time thinking nobody would ever see me clearly." Dante set his plate down. "Then they were fools. And you? I saw you too late," he said. "But I did see you." Beatrice looked down at her hands, strong hands, soft hands, hands that had worked with chemicals, kneaded dough, held hot pans, and stopped death from reaching a man who had built his life around never needing anyone. For years she had believed her size made her something the world had to tolerate. Tonight her body had carried her into the room. Her voice had stopped the fork. Her knowledge had exposed the lie. Her courage had saved a life. When Dante offered his hand, she looked at it for a moment before placing hers in his. He did not pull her like she belonged to him. He held her like she mattered. By the time the sun rose over Moretti House, Beatrice Vale was no longer the ignored daughter hidden behind kitchen doors. She was no longer the embarrassing sister, the useful chef, the soft woman everyone thought would stay quiet. She walked through the mansion beside Dante Moretti, with flour still on her sleeve and fire quietly returning to her eyes. The guards stepped aside for her. Elena bowed her head with respect. And somewhere deep below the house, Victor Sorrento learned that the woman he had dismissed as kitchen help had destroyed him with nothing more than memory, courage, and a sense of smell sharpened by a lifetime of being told to stay out of sight. Dan stopped at the front doors and looked at Beatrice as morning light touched her face. "You saved me twice," he said. Beatrice met his gaze. This time, she did not look away. "Maybe next time you should let me choose the menu and the guest list." A slow smile spread across his face, rare and dangerous and almost beautiful. "Anything you want, Beatrice?" She smiled back, not shyly, not nervously, but with the calm strength of a woman who had finally stepped into the room and found it smaller than her courage. The world had called her too much for too long, too big, too emotional, too ordinary, too easy to forget. But Dante Moretti knew the truth now, and so did everyone who had watched her stand between him and death. Beatrice Vale was not too much. She was exactly enough to save a king. And from that morning forward, she would never stand behind the kitchen doors, waiting to be invited into her own life again.
New Orleans had buried men for less than the secrets Mara Bellamy carried in her name. A stolen fortune was moving through the city, like dirty rainwater through cracked stone, slipping beneath bright casinos, quiet banks, and luxury towers built on promises that were never meant to be kept. By midnight, one forged signature could destroy her life forever, and the man who had kissed every soft inch of her body with lies was already gone. Mara did not know that the same betrayal dragging her toward ruin had also placed her directly in the path of Dante Vascari, the most feared man in the South. She only knew that her accounts were frozen, her apartment was in danger, her career was bleeding out, and somewhere in the French Quarter, beneath the low cry of a trumpet, a dangerous stranger was watching her like she was the only honest thing left in a room full of ghosts. The rain came down softly over New Orleans that night, washing the old streets until the gas lamps along the quarter glowed like tired gold. Water slid over balconies, dripped from iron railings, and gathered in the uneven cracks of the sidewalk. Mara Bellamy moved through it without an umbrella, her dark curls damp against her cheeks, her black dress clinging lightly to the full curve of her arms and the wide softness of her hips. She should have gone home. She should have locked the door of her small apartment, curled under a blanket, and tried to sleep through the sharp, cruel panic waiting in her chest. But home did not feel safe anymore. Home had become a place filled with unopened bills, frozen credit cards, warning emails, and the quiet, poisonous voice in her mind telling her that everyone had been right about her all along. She had spent her whole life being told to make herself smaller, not always in direct words. Sometimes it was a glance in an elevator, a chair pulled back with a little too much concern, a saleswoman smiling tightly before saying they did not carry her size, a date looking surprised when she ordered dessert. Mara had learned the language of polite rejection before she was old enough to call it cruelty. She knew how to laugh before someone could make the joke first. She knew how to hide her body under soft layers, how to sit at the edge of a room, how to carry brilliance quietly, because the world was more comfortable when women like her did not shine too brightly. But numbers had never cared what she looked like. Numbers were clean. Numbers told the truth if a person was patient enough to listen. Mara had built a career out of listening to numbers, finding the small cracks in perfect ledgers, the missing decimals, the ghost accounts, the false invoices pretending to be ordinary business. She was a forensic accountant, one of the best in New Orleans, though few people said that out loud. Men in expensive suits liked her work, but not her presence. They loved the reports she wrote, the fraud she uncovered, the messes she quietly solved. They just preferred her hidden behind emails and spreadsheets, where her soft body did not disturb the polished image of their boardrooms. Julian Cross had been different, or at least he had known exactly how to pretend. He had looked at Mara like she was sunlight breaking through a closed room. He had touched her stomach without hesitation, kissed the soft underside of her jaw, held her heavy thighs in his hands like they were something precious. He had called her beautiful in a voice so gentle that she had believed him before she had a chance to protect herself. Julian had been charming in the way dangerous men often are, not loud, not rough, not obviously cruel. His cruelty had worn a tailored suit, expensive cologne, and a smile that made her feel chosen. When he asked her to help clean up the books for his luxury redevelopment company, she had thought he trusted her. He told her the company was expanding too quickly, that the investors were nervous, that he needed someone brilliant and loyal to help keep everything clean before the next funding round. Mara had wanted to believe she was helping build their future. She had wanted to believe every late night, every signed approval, every document he rushed past her tired eyes was part of something they shared. She had not known he was taking her digital signatures, attaching them to false invoices, moving stolen money through accounts linked to her professional name, and building a cage around her one transaction at a time. Then Julian disappeared. He did not leave a note. He did not answer his phone. His office was empty, his assistant gone, his private accounts stripped clean. By noon, Mara's bank cards stopped working. By evening, her landlord called about missed payments she had never missed. By the next morning, 2 investigators in stiff grey suits were waiting outside her office with questions about payments she had never approved and companies she had never heard of. Every document had her name on it. Every false invoice carried her access credentials. Every stolen dollar seemed to pass through her hands, even though she had never touched a cent. Mara tried to explain. She printed emails. She showed timelines. She walked them through the accounts until her voice grew hoarse and her hands trembled over the conference table. But panic makes truth look desperate, and desperate women are easy to doubt. Her firm placed her on leave. Her colleagues stopped meeting her eyes. Former friends replied with careful, distant messages that sounded more like legal protection than comfort. She could almost hear the whispers forming behind closed doors. Poor Mara, lonely Mara, big, foolish Mara, so grateful to be loved that she let a handsome man turn her into a criminal. By the time she reached the Blue Veil, she felt hollow enough to vanish. The club sat behind an unmarked blue door on a narrow street where music seemed to rise from the stones themselves. Inside, the air was warm and smoky, touched with bourbon, rain, perfume, and old velvet. A woman on stage sang in a voice so soft and wounded it made every table fall silent. The walls were dark blue, almost black, and the small candles on the tables flickered like secrets. Wealthy people filled the room in low conversation, women with shining shoulders, and men with watches worth more than Mara's car. They looked effortless, untouchable, the kind of people who had never watched a debit card decline while buying groceries, never cried in a courthouse bathroom, never wondered whether the worst thing someone said about their body might also be true. Mara found a small table near the back, ordered a drink she barely tasted, and sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her black dress was simple, old, and a little too tight from the stress eating she had been doing since Julian vanished. She tugged at the fabric over her stomach, then hated herself for doing it. She was exhausted from apologizing for existing, exhausted from being soft in a world that treated softness like a weakness. exhausted from missing a man who had never been real. Above the club, behind a private railing shadowed by blue light, Dante Vescari watched her. He was not supposed to be looking at the woman crying quietly into a glass of untouched whiskey. He was supposed to be listening to his men discuss a stolen shipment that had vanished from the docks 2 nights earlier. A shipment with his family's mark on it. A shipment no one in the city should have been stupid enough to touch. Dante controlled the river routes, the private casinos, the dock unions, and half the politicians who smiled for cameras while taking his money behind closed doors. His name was spoken carefully in New Orleans, never too loud and never as a joke. Men who betrayed him learned quickly that the city had many places where screams could disappear. Dante was a man built from restraint. He did not shout. He did not waste movement. His dark suits were always perfect, his voice always calm, his punishments always remembered. People mistook that calm for patience only once. Tonight, his men spoke in low, nervous tones around him, showing him reports, security photos, routes, names. Dante heard all of it. He missed nothing. Yet his eyes kept returning to the woman below. Mara did not belong in the blue veil, not because she was less than the people around her, but because she was too real for it. Everyone else wore masks, smooth smiles, false laughter, polished hunger hidden behind crystal glasses. Mara sat there with heartbreak leaking out of her, like light from a cracked door. She tried to hold herself together, but her shoulders were shaking, just enough for Dante to notice. Her face was soft and full, her mouth trembling every time she swallowed back tears. She looked wounded, ashamed, and far too alone. Something in Dante's chest tightened in a way he did not trust. He had seen beautiful women cry before. He had caused some of those tears himself. Tears usually bored him. They were tools, tricks, or consequences. But this woman's pain had no performance in it. It was quiet, private, and raw. She was not asking the room to save her. She was trying to survive being seen by no one at all. Below, a man in a pale linen suit noticed her too. Dante recognized him immediately. Everett Duval, a real estate investor with clean shoes, dirty money, and the kind of smile that made decent people move away without knowing why. Duval had been circling the edges of Vescari territory for months, buying ruined buildings, forcing old tenants out, turning neighborhoods into polished shells. He approached Mara's table with a glass in his hand, and confidence he had not earned. Mara looked up when his shadow fell over her. She wiped quickly beneath one eye, embarrassed that a stranger had seen her crying. "You look like you could use better company," Duval said, sliding into the chair across from her without asking. Mara stiffened. "I'm fine. Thank you." "You don't look fine." His gaze drifted over her body in a slow, ugly way that made her skin crawl. "You look like someone who got left behind." The words hit too close. Mara pushed her chair back a little. "Please leave me alone." Duval smiled wider, enjoying the tremor in her voice. "Now, that's no way to talk to someone offering kindness. Women like you should be grateful when a man takes interest." The music kept playing. The singer's voice floated softly over the room. Nobody at the nearby tables looked over for more than a second. Mara felt the old shame rise like floodwater, hot and familiar. Women like you. It was amazing how much cruelty could fit into 3 small words. "I said leave me alone," Mara whispered, trying to stand. Duval reached across the table and caught her wrist, not hard enough to make a scene, just hard enough to remind her that he could. From the balcony, Dante went still. The men around him stopped talking before they even understood why. One of them, a broad-shouldered enforcer named Nico, followed Dante's gaze and quietly closed the folder in his hands. Dante set his untouched drink on the railing. His face did not change. That was what made every man near him afraid. Downstairs, Mara tried to pull her hand free. "Let go!" Duval leaned closer. "You should be careful. A woman in your position can't afford to be rude. I know who you are, Mara Bellamy. I know about the fraud investigation. I know about Julian Cross. People are saying you helped him steal from half the city." Mara's breath caught. Duval's thumb pressed lightly against her pulse. "Come with me. We can talk somewhere private." Maybe I can help make things easier for you. Before Mara could answer, the air beside the table changed. Dante Vescari stood there like a storm that had learned to wear a suit. He was tall, broad, and perfectly still, his black jacket falling clean over powerful shoulders. His eyes were so dark they seemed almost empty at first, until Mara looked closer and saw the quiet violence moving behind them. Duval released her wrist so quickly the chair scraped beneath him. "Mr. Vescari," he said, the color draining from his face, "I didn't realize you were here." Dante did not look at him. His eyes were on Mara's wrist, where Duval's fingers had left pale marks against her skin. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft enough that Mara almost leaned closer to hear it. "You touched her." Duval swallowed. It was a misunderstanding. Dante turned his head slowly. "No, a misunderstanding is when a man forgets which glass is his. This was a choice." The whole table area seemed to fall quiet, though the music still played. Mara could feel people watching now, their curiosity sharp and hungry. Duval tried to smile, but it broke apart before it reached his eyes. "I meant no disrespect." "You meant it," Dante said. "That is the problem." Duval opened his mouth, then closed it. Whatever he saw in Dante's face made him step back. "Of course, my apologies to the lady." Dante's voice dropped lower. "Leave the club, leave the quarter. By morning, leave every project with my name near it. If I hear you breathed in her direction again, I will not send a warning next time." Duval nodded once, stiff and terrified, then walked away so quickly he nearly collided with a waiter. Mara sat frozen, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She knew Dante's name. Everyone in New Orleans knew Dante Vescari's name, even if they pretended they did not. He was not a businessman, not really. He was a shadow, with a mansion, a criminal with politicians in his pocket, a man mothers warned their sons not to cross. And now he was pulling out the chair Duval had used, sitting across from her, as if they were simply two strangers meeting in the rain. He lifted one hand, and a waiter appeared almost instantly. "Water," Dante said. "No ice, and bring something warm." "I don't need anything," Mara said, though her voice shook. Dante looked at her then, fully, and the attention of him was almost too much to bear. He did not glance away from her body. He did not look through her. He looked at her like every detail mattered, like the softness she had spent years hiding was not a flaw, but a fact worth studying. "You're trembling," he said. "I'm having a bad week." Something almost like amusement touched his mouth, but it vanished quickly. "That was not a bad week sitting across from you. That was a predator." Mara let out a broken little laugh before she could stop herself. "I think I've had enough predators for one lifetime." Dante's eyes sharpened. Julian Cross. The name hit the table between them like a dropped blade. Mara went still. "How do you know that name?" Dante did not answer immediately. The waiter returned with water and a bowl of warm gumbo Mara had not ordered. Dante pushed the water gently toward her. "Drink first. I asked you a question, and your hands are shaking too badly to hold your anger properly," he said. "Drink." She hated that she obeyed. She hated more that the water helped. The coolness steadied her throat, and the warmth of the bowl in front of her made her realize she had not eaten since morning. Dante watched her notice the food, then look away from it. His jaw tightened slightly. "Eat if you want to eat, Mara. No one at this table is allowed to judge your hunger." Her eyes burned. It was such a small thing, said in such a calm voice, but it landed somewhere deep and bruised. "People always judge hunger. Then people have been careless with you." She looked down at the table, because looking at him felt dangerous. "You don't know anything about me. I know a man put his hands on you and expected you to accept it. I know he used shame because he thought it would make you easier to move. I know you came here alone, in the rain, with the face of a woman who has been betrayed by someone she loved." Dante paused, his voice quieting. "And I know Julian Cross has been stealing from me." Mara's head snapped up. For one moment, the club seemed to tilt. The candles blurred. The trumpet on stage stretched into a long, mournful note. "What did you say?" Dante leaned back, studying her with a cold focus that frightened her less than it should have. Several $1 million disappeared through a redevelopment project connected to the riverfront. The transfers were hidden inside clean invoices and routed through names that looked harmless. One of those names was yours. Mara pressed a hand over her mouth. Shame, fear, and fury rolled through her so fast she could barely breathe. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Julian told me the accounts were legitimate. He said the investors needed clean records before closing. He used my credentials. He used my signatures. I never stole anything. I believe you. The words were immediate. No hesitation. No careful pause. Mara stared at him, stunned by the force of relief that nearly broke her. Why? She whispered. Because if you had stolen from me, you would not be sitting in the back of my club crying into cheap whiskey, Dante said. You would be somewhere warm, expensive, and very far from New Orleans. A weak, painful laugh escaped her. That's your proof. That, and the fact that Julian Cross is a coward. Cowards prefer shields. His gaze lowered to her wrist again. He chose you because your reputation was clean and your heart was loyal. He mistook kindness for stupidity. Mara looked away as tears spilled before she could stop them. Maybe it was stupidity. No, Dante said, and for the first time, something hard entered his voice that was not aimed at her. It was betrayal. The word settled over her like a blanket and a wound at the same time. Betrayal. Not foolishness. Not desperation. Not proof that she was too needy, too soft, too much. Betrayal. Something done to her, not something she had deserved. Dante reached into his jacket and placed a black card on the table. No logo, no name, just a number embossed in silver. You are not safe tonight, he said. If Julian is desperate, he may contact you. If Duval knows your name, others do too. And if my enemies think you can lead them to my money, they will come for you before sunrise. Mara stared at the card. Are you threatening me or helping me? Dante's eyes held hers. I have not decided what to do with Julian yet, but with you, I am helping. That's supposed to comfort me? No. His voice softened again. It is supposed to be true. The singer on stage moved into another song, slower than the last, her voice curling through the blue haze like smoke. Outside, rain tapped against the windows. Mara should have stood and left. She should have run from this man, from his world, from the quiet promise of violence in every word he spoke. Instead, she sat there with warm food in front of her, water in her hands, and a dangerous stranger looking at her as if her ruin had offended him personally. My apartment, she said weakly. I need to go home. Dante's expression did not change, but his eyes darkened. Your apartment is the first place Julian will look. I can't just go with you. No, he said. You can choose to. The difference should not have mattered. Somehow, it did. Mara looked at the room around her, at the glittering people pretending not to stare, at the blue walls, at the candles, at the door Duval had fled through. Then she looked back at Dante Vascari, the man every sensible person in New Orleans feared, and felt the strangest, softest terror unfold in her chest. Because he was dangerous. There was no pretending otherwise. But for the first time in days, maybe years, she did not feel small beneath a man's gaze. She felt seen, and that was the most frightening thing of all. Mara Bellamy should have known better than to follow a dangerous man into the rain, but fear had a strange way of changing shape when it was offered a warm hand instead of a threat. Dante Vascari did not touch her as they left the blue veil. He walked beside her, close enough to shield her from the narrow sidewalk and the passing cars, but never close enough to make her feel trapped. That almost made it worse. Mara understood force. She understood pressure. She understood men who smiled while taking pieces of her life. But Dante's control was quieter, colder, and somehow more frightening, because it left room for choice. He opened the back door of a black car waiting at the curb, then stood under the soft rain while she stared at him, her heart thudding hard enough to hurt. You can still walk away, he said. Mara looked down the street. Rain shone on the old stones. Music drifted from somewhere behind her, soft and lonely. Her apartment was across the city, full of bills, warnings, and memories of Julian's voice telling her not to worry. Her whole life was waiting there, but it no longer felt like hers. It felt like a room someone had already searched, emptied, and left unlocked for the next stranger to enter. So Mara stepped into the car. The ride through New Orleans passed in a blur of wet lights and shadowed buildings. Dante sat across from her, not beside her, one hand resting loosely on his knee, while his eyes remained fixed on the city beyond the glass. He did not fill the silence with false comfort. He did not ask her to trust him. That was perhaps the only reason Mara did not break apart. Trust had become a word with teeth. She had given it to Julian, wrapped in love, and he had used it to sign her name beneath crimes she never committed. Dante's mansion stood beyond the garden district, hidden behind iron gates and thick walls covered in climbing ivy. It was not flashy in the way Mara expected. No golden fountains, no grand performance of wealth. It was old, pale, and quiet, with gas lanterns glowing along the drive and guards moving like shadows near the trees. The place looked as if it had been listening to secrets for 100 years and had never once repeated them. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar, rain, and lemon oil. Dante led her through a long hall lined with dark paintings and closed doors. His men stayed behind at a distance. No one stared at her body. No one smirked at the way her dress clung damply to her soft stomach or the curve of her hips. They looked at Dante, then looked away, as if Mara had already become something they were not allowed to question. A woman with silver hair brought her dry clothes, tea, and a quiet room with tall windows overlooking the wet garden. Mara changed into a loose robe that somehow fit her perfectly, then sat on the edge of the bed with the tea cooling between her palms. The kindness felt dangerous. The comfort felt rented. She waited for the demand, the price, the moment Dante would reveal that he was only another man who had found a use for her. But he did not come to her room that night. Morning arrived grey and soft, with rain still whispering against the windows. Mara woke from a shallow, restless sleep to the sound of her phone buzzing on the table beside the bed. For one breathless second, she thought it was her firm, or her landlord, or one of the investigators asking another question she no longer had the strength to answer. Then she saw the blocked number. Her blood turned cold. She answered before she could think better of it. "Mara," Julian breathed, and the sound of his voice nearly split her open. For weeks she had imagined what she would say if he called. She had imagined screaming, crying, begging, demanding the truth. But now that his voice was real, all she could do was sit frozen in the soft robe of a stranger's mansion, holding the phone as if it might burn her. "Where are you?" she whispered. "That doesn't matter. Listen to me. I know things look bad, but I can fix them. I can fix everything." Mara closed her eyes. Even now, some foolish part of her wanted to believe him. That was what made betrayal so cruel. It did not only steal from the present, it made the past look fake. Every kiss, every promise, every time he had called her beautiful and made her believe the word belonged to her. "You used my name," she said. "I protected you," Julian said quickly. "You don't understand what kind of people I was dealing with. I had to move things around. It got complicated. You forged my signatures. I borrowed your access. There's a difference." A quiet sound came from the doorway. Mara looked up and saw Dante standing there, already dressed in a black suit, his face perfectly still. He did not enter. He only watched her with eyes that seemed to hear everything. Julian kept talking, his voice shaking now. "There's one account left, Mara. Just one. If you give me the access codes, I can clear your name. We can disappear. We can still have the life we talked about." Mara's grip tightened around the phone. "You mean the life you sold me while you were stealing from me?" "I loved you," Julian said, but the words came too fast, too thin. "I did. I still do. But the Viscari family is involved now, and they'll kill me if I don't pay them back. They'll come after you too. I'm trying to save us." At the name Viscari, Dante's expression changed by the smallest degree. Not surprise, confirmation. Mara's throat went dry. "Where?" There was a pause. Julian breathed in hard, as if relief had knocked the air from him. The old riverboat casino past Algiers Point. Tonight, come alone. Bring the codes for the Bellevue escrow account. After that, no more lies. I swear. Mara looked at Dante. For the first time since the Blue Veil, she understood fully what kind of world had opened beneath her feet. Julian was not just a thief. He was a desperate man running through a maze of monsters, and he had planned to pull her in front of him when the teeth closed. "I'll come," she said softly. Dante's eyes narrowed. Julian exhaled. Good girl. I knew you still loved me." Mara ended the call. The room went silent except for the rain. Dante stepped inside. "You are not going." Mara laughed once, but it came out broken. "You don't get to order me around." "No," he said, "but I can tell you the truth. Julian Cross does not want to run away with you. He wants your codes. After that, he will either leave you for my men to find, or put your body somewhere the river can carry it." The bluntness made her flinch, but she knew he was right. Deep down, she had known from the moment Julian said "good girl," the same soft phrase he used whenever he wanted her obedient, grateful, quiet. Mara stood slowly. "You're Dante Vescari." "I am." "Not just a nightclub owner, not just some powerful man with guards. You're him." Dante did not soften the truth. "Yes." She wrapped her arms around herself, feeling suddenly cold despite the robe. "And Julian stole from you." "Yes." "So what am I to you? Evidence? Bait? A convenient witness with a ruined reputation?" His jaw tightened. "At first, I thought you might be useful." The honesty hurt more than a lie would have. "At first," he continued, "then I saw your wrist. Then I heard your voice when you said his name. Then I understood that Julian Cross did not just steal money. He broke something he had no right to touch." Mara looked away before he could see her tears. "You don't know me well enough to care." "No," Dante said quietly, "but I know enough to be angry." That should have frightened her. A man like Dante Vescari being angry on her behalf should have sent her running. Instead, Mara felt a dangerous warmth spread through the hollow place Julian had left behind. Dante did not let her go to the riverboat. He went in her place. Night fell heavy over the old casino, turning the river black beneath a thin veil of fog. The riverboat had once been painted white and gold, but time had peeled the beauty from it. Now it sat chained to a rotting dock, windows dark, decks slick with rain. Its grand name faded until only a few letters remained. Julian arrived near midnight in a grey coat, collar pulled high, eyes wild with fear. He carried no weapon. Men like Julian rarely did their own damage with their own hands. He stepped onto the boat expecting Mara. He found Dante waiting in the main hall, surrounded by quiet men in dark coats. Julian stopped so suddenly his shoes slipped on the damp floor. "Where is she?" "Safe," Dante said. Julian tried to smile. It was painful to watch. "Mr. Vescari, this is a misunderstanding." Dante stood beneath a broken chandelier, his hands relaxed at his sides. Many men say that before they start begging. Julian's smile vanished. "Mara did this. You have to understand, she handled the accounts. She was angry because I left her. She's unstable, emotional. You saw her. A woman like that gets desperate when someone finally pays attention to her." Dante's face went very still. Julian, too panicked to sense danger, kept talking. "She wanted to feel important. She's always been insecure about her body, about men, about everything. I gave her confidence, and she got attached. Women like Mara are easy to lead if you make them feel pretty." The silence that followed was colder than the river outside. Dante stepped closer. "You built your theft on her trust." Julian backed away. "I can get your money. That's why I called her. I can unlock the last account." "You will unlock every account. I need protection." "You needed wisdom," Dante said. "You chose greed instead. What happened on that riverboat was never written into any report. There were no police calls, no witnesses willing to speak, no security footage left behind. By dawn, every hidden account Julian controlled had been opened. Every dollar stolen through Mara's name had been traced and reversed. The false debts connected to her were cleared. The records proving Julian's fraud were sent anonymously to the right investigators, the right journalists, and the right corporate boards. The money stolen from the Viscari family returned quietly to where it belonged. Julian Cross did not die that night. Dante had promised Mara he would not take that choice from her. But when Julian left New Orleans, he left without money, without allies, without access, and without the handsome confidence he had used like a weapon. There are punishments that do not require a grave. Some men live longer when they have to watch their own name rot. When Dante returned to the mansion, the sun was just beginning to grey the sky. Mara was waiting in the library, wearing the same robe, her hair loose around her shoulders. She stood when he entered, searching his face for answers. "He's alive," Dante said. Her shoulders dropped with a relief she hated needing. "And my name will be restored. The process may take time in public, but the evidence is already moving. Your accounts will be unfrozen, your debts cleared, your firm will either apologize or lose clients until it learns manners." Mara stared at him, overwhelmed. "You did all that overnight." "I have efficient people." She almost laughed. Then she saw the tiredness hidden beneath his control, the faint strain around his eyes, the quiet anger still held behind his calm. "What did you do to him?" Dante looked at her for a long moment. "Enough." Mara nodded. She did not ask for details. Maybe that should have made her feel guilty. Maybe a better woman would have demanded justice through clean channels, clean rooms, clean men with clean hands. But the world had not been clean with Mara. Julian had used the law's paperwork, the bank's systems, and the polished language of business to destroy her. Dante had answered from the shadows, and for the first time in weeks, she could breathe. "You're free to go," Dante said. The words struck her strangely. "What?" "Your name can be restored without you staying here. I will arrange a car. Security if you want it, money if you need it. You owe me nothing." Mara studied him. "That sounds almost noble." "I am not noble." "No," she said softly. "You're not." Dante's mouth curved faintly. "But I am honest with you." That was the trouble. He was. Dante did not pretend to be harmless. He did not cover the darkness in himself with pretty excuses. Julian had offered romance and delivered ruin. Dante offered danger and delivered protection. The difference should not have mattered so much, but it did. "Do you want me to leave?" Mara asked. His gaze dropped for 1 second to her mouth, then returned to her eyes. "No." The single word moved through the room like thunder heard from far away. "I want you to stay," he said. "Not because you are afraid, not because you are grateful, not because I cleared your debts. I want you to stay because when I look at you, Mara Bellamy, I see a woman who survived a man who tried to make her small. I see a mind sharp enough to follow money through smoke. I see a heart that stayed loyal even when loyalty was used against it. And I see a body you have been taught to apologize for when there is nothing about you that needs forgiveness." Mara's eyes filled before she could stop them. "You make it sound easy." "It will not be easy. Because of who you are. Because of who we both are." She stepped closer, slowly, as if approaching the edge of deep water. "I'm still scared of you. You should be a little scared of me. That's not romantic." "No," Dante said, his voice low, "but it is true." Mara smiled through her tears, and something in his face softened so completely that it made him look almost human. She reached for his hand. Dante went still when her fingers touched his, as if this simple contact startled him more than any weapon could have. "I'm not staying as your rescued woman," she said. His hand closed gently around hers. "No, I'm not going to be hidden away in this house while men make decisions about my life. No. And if I stay, I work. I use what I know." Julian was not the only person moving money through those redevelopment accounts. There are other patterns, other names, maybe even someone inside your organization helping him. For the first time, Dante smiled. It was small, dark, and full of dangerous pride. "I was hoping you would say that." So Mara stayed. Not all at once, not easily. Some mornings, shame still found her before the sunlight did. Some nights, she woke from dreams of Julian's voice and had to remind herself that the locks were strong, the accounts were clear, and the man sleeping down the hall had never once asked her to shrink. Dante gave her space until she crossed it herself. He brought her files instead of flowers, evidence instead of empty promises. He had a workroom prepared for her, with monitors, ledgers, and every record his people could gather. He did not hover, but he watched. Not like a jailer, like a man studying the weather of a woman who had become important to his survival. Mara found the betrayal inside his organization in 6 days. It was not loud. Betrayal rarely was. It hid in small vendor payments, repeated consulting fees, river permits approved too quickly, and one casino account that rounded numbers in a way no honest system would. The traitor was a Vescari lieutenant named Paulie Renard, a smiling man with silver cufflinks and a habit of calling Mara sweetheart when Dante was not in the room. He had been feeding Julian information for months, helping move money through shell projects while planning to sell dock routes to a rival family. When Mara presented the evidence, Dante did not interrupt her once. His men gathered around the long table in silence while she walked them through every transfer, every false invoice, every hidden connection. Her voice shook at first, but then it steadied. The numbers were hers again. The truth was hers again. By the end, no one in the room was looking at her like a victim. They were looking at her like a weapon. Paulie tried to laugh it off. Then he tried to blame her. Then he made the mistake of mentioning Julian. Dante did not raise his voice. He simply asked everyone except Mara to leave the room. Whatever happened after that was handled behind closed doors. Mara did not need to see it. She had already won. The months that followed changed the shape of her life. The scandal around Julian broke publicly, then turned sharply in Mara's favor as evidence poured into the light. Her old firm tried to welcome her back with polished apologies and careful legal language. Mara declined. Then she opened her own forensic audit company with clients who paid in advance and never once asked her to stay out of the room. Dante invested nothing unless she asked. She did not ask. That mattered to both of them. Their romance grew in the quiet spaces between danger. It grew over late-night coffee and rain against the windows. It grew in the way Dante learned the exact tea she liked when she was anxious, and the way Mara learned that his silence often meant he was feeling too much, not too little. It grew in the first kiss she chose, standing in his garden after a storm, when she touched his face, and he looked at her, as if the whole city had stopped breathing. It grew darker too, passionate and consuming, full of the kind of hunger that no longer made Mara feel ashamed. Dante wanted her softness. He wanted her laughter. He wanted her sharp mind and her tender heart and the body she had spent years trying to make invisible. Under his gaze, Mara did not become smaller. She became undeniable. By winter, New Orleans had learned to say her name differently. The charity auction was held inside a restored opera house Julian had once promised to renovate with stolen money. Now its gold balconies gleamed under warm light, and the city's richest families gathered beneath painted ceilings to bid on art, favors, and forgiveness. Mara arrived in a midnight blue gown made just for her, the fabric draping over her full figure like water under moonlight. It did not hide her arms. It did not fight her stomach or punish her hips. It celebrated every soft, living inch of her. Dante stood beside her in black, one hand resting lightly at her lower back, not guiding, not owning, simply there. The room noticed. Of course it did. People stared at the ring on Mara's finger, at Dante's closeness, at the way men who once ignored her now stepped aside before she reached them. Some smiled too brightly, some whispered, some looked afraid. Mara found, with quiet wonder, that none of it hurt the way it used to. Then, a familiar voice cut through the music. "Mara Bellamy, I have to admit, I didn't expect to see you here." She turned to find Grant Ellison, a former colleague from her old firm, holding a champagne glass and wearing the same smug expression he had worn when Mara was placed on leave. His gaze flicked over her gown, her body, her ring. "You've certainly recovered quickly," he said, "though I suppose scandal is easier to survive with powerful company." Dante's hand went still against her back. Mara touched his wrist once. A quiet request. Wait. Then she smiled at Grant. It's nice to see you too. His smile sharpened. I just hope your new clients understand your history. Some people might worry about trusting financial investigations to someone with your name attached to fraud. Mara tilted her head. That would be unfortunate for them. Grant blinked, caught off guard by her calm. You may want to check your email, Mara continued. My firm was retained this morning to conduct an independent forensic audit of your company's riverfront holdings. The board signed the agreement 2 hours ago. I'll be personally reviewing the expense accounts, vendor payments, and executive reimbursements. The color drained from his face. Mara took a slow sip of water. So, if there is nothing to find, you have nothing to worry about. Around them, the conversation thinned. People were listening now. Grant opened his mouth, then closed it, his confidence folding in on itself like wet paper. Dante leaned closer, his voice low enough for only Mara to hear. Beautifully done. Mara did not look at him. If she did, she might smile too much. I learned from dangerous company. No, Dante murmured. You were dangerous before me. And for the first time, Mara believed it. Later that night, after the auction ended and the opera house emptied into the cold glitter of New Orleans, Mara stood alone for a moment, beneath the grand entrance lights. The city hummed around her, alive with secrets, music, and shadows. She thought of the woman who had walked into the blue veil in the rain, ashamed and exhausted, certain her life was over. She wished she could reach back through time and take that woman's hand. She would tell her that softness was not weakness, that trust, given to the wrong man, was not stupidity. That a body could be full, a heart could be wounded, a voice could tremble, and still a woman could rise. Dante came to stand beside her. Ready to go home? Mara looked at him, this feared man who had entered her life like a storm and stayed like a vow. He was still dangerous. He would always be dangerous. But he had never asked her to be less than herself in order to be loved. She slid her hand into his. Yes. Together, they stepped into the waiting night, past the watching eyes of a city that had once mistaken Mara Bellamy for an easy target. Julian's betrayal had nearly destroyed her, but it had not ended her. It had led her through rain, shame, fear, and darkness into a world where power wore many faces, and hers was one of them now. Mara was still soft, still fat, still emotional, still tender in places the world had tried to harden, but she no longer apologized for any of it. She stood beside Dante Vascari, not as a rescued woman, not as a hidden lover, and not as a beautiful secret kept behind mansion walls. She stood as his equal, his fiancé, his sharpest mind in a city of shadows, and the woman who had finally learned that taking up space was not a flaw. It was a throne.
The night Marcus Hale threw his wife into the freezing rain, he believed he was finally stepping into the life he deserved. He believed the soft woman he had hidden behind polite smiles and expensive lies was nothing more than dead weight from his past. He believed Chicago's richest families would admire him for cutting her loose in front of everyone. What Marcus did not know was that the rain outside his mansion was carrying Isabella Romano straight into the path of a man who never forgot a debt, never forgave an insult, and never allowed anyone to hurt the woman who had once saved his blood. The mansion on Astor Street glowed like a palace against the dark Chicago sky. Tall windows spilled warm gold light across the wet stone driveway, while black cars rolled up one after another, bringing investors, judges, bankers, and people who smiled with perfect teeth while hiding hunger behind their eyes. Inside, everything smelled of polished wood, white roses, expensive wine, and the kind of money that wanted to be seen without ever admitting it wanted attention. Crystal glasses chimed softly. A string quartet played near the marble staircase. Servers moved through the crowd with silver trays, their eyes lowered, their steps careful, as if even the air inside that house belonged to Marcus Hale. Isabella Romano stood near the edge of the dining room, holding a glass of untouched water between both hands. She wore a midnight blue dress that she had bought 3 years ago for another party. Back when Marcus still kissed her shoulder before walking into a room. Back when he still called her beautiful in a voice low enough that she believed him. The dress was soft and simple. It covered her rounded arms and fell gently over her wide hips, but it no longer felt like something chosen with love. It felt like armor. Thin armor. The kind that looked pretty under a chandelier but did nothing to stop a knife. She watched Marcus laugh near the fireplace, one hand resting on the lower back of a young woman in a silver dress. Her name was Vanessa Cole. She was the daughter of one of his newest investors, all sharp bones, glossy hair, and easy confidence. Vanessa leaned close when Marcus spoke, letting her hand rest on his chest in a way no woman should touch another woman's husband. Marcus did not move away. He smiled wider. He looked alive in a way Isabella had not seen in years, and the sight of it was so quiet and painful that she almost wished he would simply slap her. A slap would have ended. This kind of shame kept breathing. For years, Isabella had helped build the world that now rejected her. She had stayed up late reading Marcus's contracts when his eyes blurred from stress. She had made phone calls he was too proud to make. She had remembered names, softened tempers, mailed thank you gifts, covered debts, explained mistakes, and smiled beside him when he needed a loyal wife to make him look stable. In the early days, before the mansion, before the private driver, before the people in tailored suits started calling him visionary, Marcus had come home shaking from failed meetings and unpaid bills. Isabella had held him then. She had cooked pasta in a tiny kitchen with a broken window and told him he was not finished. She had believed in him so fiercely that she forgot to keep any belief for herself. Now, in the house her patience had helped buy, she felt like a guest no one wanted to seat. Mrs. Whitaker, the wife of Marcus's largest investor, drifted toward her with a smile so delicate it almost looked kind. Her diamonds flashed at her throat, her eyes did not. "Isabella, dear," she said softly, looking down at Isabella's dress, then at her body, then back at her face. "I hope you are enjoying the evening." "It's lovely," Isabella answered. Mrs. Whitaker's smile tightened. "Marcus has done so well for himself. It must be exciting to see him rise this far." Isabella knew what the woman meant. It must be exciting that a man like Marcus still lets someone like you stand nearby. She had learned to hear the words under the words. Wealthy people rarely needed to be loud to be cruel. They could slice you open with a compliment and leave no blood on the floor. Before Isabella could answer, Marcus appeared beside them. His black tuxedo fit him perfectly. His dark hair was brushed back. His smile was calm, charming, and empty. He looked at Mrs. Whitaker first, not at his wife. "I hope Isabella isn't boring you," he said with a light laugh. Mrs. Whitaker gave him a playful look. "Not at all." Marcus finally turned toward Isabella. His eyes moved over her with quick irritation, as if she were a stain on his perfect evening. "You should mingle," he said quietly. "Standing in corners makes people uncomfortable." Isabella's fingers tightened around her glass. "I was speaking with Mrs. Whitaker." "Of course," Marcus said, still smiling for the room. "But try not to look so nervous. People can sense insecurity." The words were soft, but Isabella felt them land. She looked down, swallowing the ache in her throat. There had been a time when Marcus protected her from rooms like this. Now he fed her to them one small bite at a time. Dinner was announced just after 9. The guests moved into the long dining room, where candles burned in crystal holders and the table stretched beneath a ceiling painted with pale clouds. Isabella found her name card near the far end, 3 seats away from Marcus. Vanessa sat beside him. Isabella stared at the seating arrangement, her face warming. She did not speak. She simply lowered herself into the chair and folded her hands in her lap, while laughter lifted around her like smoke. The first course came, then the second. Marcus spoke about expansion, land acquisition, investment returns, and the future of Hale development. People listened as if every sentence he spoke was carved from gold. Isabella listened too, hearing the old fear hiding beneath his confidence. Marcus always sounded grandest when he was closest to falling. A man near the head of the table asked how Marcus had managed to survive the early years when so many developers failed. Marcus smiled and lifted his wineglass. "Discipline," he said, "vision, knowing what to keep and what to cut away." A few guests nodded. Vanessa touched his arm. Isabella felt something cold move through her chest. Marcus continued, his voice growing richer under the attention. Success requires sacrifice. Sometimes you outgrow people who were part of your life when you had less. The table quieted, not completely, but enough. Isabella slowly raised her eyes. Marcus looked at her then, really looked at her. Not with love, not with regret, with decision. "I suppose tonight is as good a time as any," he said. The room became still. Isabella's heart began to beat so hard she could feel it in her wrists. Marcus set down his glass and stood. "Many of you have known me for years. You have watched me build something from nothing. And during that time, I have tried to keep my private life private. But the truth is, I have been carrying a marriage that no longer fits the life I have worked for." Isabella could not move. A small smile touched Vanessa's mouth. Marcus looked around the table, inviting pity, admiration, curiosity. "Isabella was with me in the beginning," he said. "I won't deny that, but beginnings are not destinies. A man has to move forward. He cannot spend his whole life apologizing for wanting beauty, ambition, and someone who represents the world he belongs in now." The silence sharpened. Isabella whispered, "Marcus." He ignored her. "I am filing for divorce," he said clearly, "and I am done pretending that this marriage is anything but a reminder of a life I left behind." A few guests looked away. Others stared openly, hungry for the drama. Mrs. Whittaker pressed a hand to her mouth, but her eyes shone. Vanessa lowered her gaze with practiced softness, as if she were not standing at the center of another woman's ruin. Isabella pushed her chair back slowly. The legs scraped the polished floor. "Please don't do this here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus turned on her, and for 1 second the mask slipped. She saw the resentment he had been feeding for years. "Why not here?" he asked. "You had no problem standing beside me when I was struggling. Why shouldn't everyone see the truth now?" "The truth?" Isabella repeated. "The truth is that you let yourself become an embarrassment," Marcus said. The words came out smooth, almost gentle, which made them worse. "I worked to become someone. I built a place among people who matter, and every room I enter I have to drag you behind me like a reminder of everything I escaped." Pain moved across Isabella's face, but she did not cry. Not yet. Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to sound intimate while still letting everyone hear. "Look at you. You don't fit here. You never did. You're soft, tired, always hiding behind loyalty like it gives you value. I need a wife who adds to my life, not one people pity me for keeping." A woman at the table inhaled sharply. No one defended Isabella. No one stood. No one told Marcus to stop. That was the moment Isabella understood something that hurt almost as much as his words. This world had accepted her sacrifices when they were invisible. It had eaten from her hands, smiled at her patience, enjoyed the comfort she created. But now that she needed even a little kindness, it looked away. She stood fully, though her knees trembled. "Everything you have," she said softly. "I helped you carry." Marcus laughed once, cold and short. "No, Isabella. You helped yourself believe that because the truth was too painful. I carried you. I gave you this house, this name, this life, and still you couldn't become someone worth showing off." Her throat tightened. The room blurred at the edges. She wanted to remind him of the nights he cried into her lap, the unpaid taxes she found a way to settle, the investor dinner she saved when he forgot half the proposal, the call she made years ago to a man whose name Marcus never knew, a man connected to money Marcus was never supposed to touch. But she said none of it. Pride held her still when love could not. Marcus reached for her wrist. His grip was hard enough to hurt. "Come with me." "Let go," she whispered. He pulled her away from the table. The guests parted as if she carried disease. Isabella stumbled behind him through the dining room, past the roses, past the music, past the mirrored hallway where she caught one broken glimpse of herself. A plus-size woman in a blue dress, cheeks pale, eyes wide, being dragged from her own home by the man she had once saved from failure. At the front doors, Marcus released her only long enough to grab her coat from the closet. Then he stopped, looked at the coat, and smiled with sudden cruelty. "No," he said. "You came into my new life dressed like a burden. You can leave it the same way. He opened the front doors. Cold air rushed in. Rain blew across the marble entryway. Isabella stared at the storm. Marcus, my shoes. One of her heels had slipped off near the dining room when he pulled her away. The other was loose on her foot. Marcus looked down, then back at her face. Walk. Then he shoved her. Isabella stumbled onto the front steps. Her bare foot hit freezing stone. The remaining heel twisted beneath her, and she fell hard onto her knees. Pain shot up her legs. Rain soaked her hair in seconds. Behind her, warm light spilled from the mansion like a cruel memory. She looked back once and saw Marcus standing in the doorway, perfect and dry, framed by wealth. You threw away the only person who loved you when you were nothing, she said. His expression flickered, but only for a moment. Then I'll enjoy being something without you, he replied. The doors closed, the sound was soft. Final, for a long moment, Isabella stayed on the wet stone steps, the rain running down her face so heavily it hid the tears that finally came. Her knees throbbed, her palms burned where they had scraped the ground, her dress clung to her body, her breath came in small shaking pulls. Somewhere inside the mansion the music began again. That almost broke her. Not the divorce, not Vanessa, not even the insults, it was the music. The way the party continued, the way the world Marcus wanted so badly swallowed her humiliation and went right back to drinking. Isabella forced herself to stand. She had no purse, no phone, no coat, one bare foot, one broken heel. The iron gate at the end of the drive looked impossibly far away. She walked anyway. Each step hurt, the cold bit into her skin. Rain soaked the soft curves of her arms and ran down her back. She wrapped both arms around herself and kept moving through the long driveway. Past the parked cars, past the silent security guard who looked at her and then looked away. That small cowardice felt familiar. Most people were brave only when kindness cost them nothing. By the time she reached the sidewalk, she was shaking so hard she could barely breathe. The street was dark and glossy with rain. The old mansions of the Gold Coast stood around her like judges. Isabella looked left then right, not knowing where to go. She thought of the woman she had been before Marcus, the girl from a crowded Italian family who believed love was something you fed, protected, and forgave. She thought of her father teaching her how to make sauce on Sunday mornings. She thought of her mother warning her that a man ashamed of your softness would eventually become ashamed of your soul. A black car slowed near the curb. Isabella stiffened. For one wild second, she thought Marcus had sent someone to bring her back. But the car was not one of his. It was longer, darker, quieter, the kind of vehicle that did not need to announce power because power moved out of its way. The rear door opened. A man stepped out under the rain without an umbrella. He was tall, dressed in a dark coat that looked almost black beneath the streetlights. His hair was thick and neatly pushed back, his face sharp in a way that made him look carved rather than born. He did not rush, he did not shout. He simply stood there, looking at Isabella with eyes so dark and still that the storm itself seemed to soften around him. Two other men stepped out behind him. They were broad, silent, and watchful. Isabella took a step back. The man's gaze dropped to her bare feet, her scraped palms, her soaked dress, then lifted to her face. Something changed in him. Not shock exactly, recognition. Isabella Romano, he said, her breath caught. Do I know you? His jaw tightened. Rain traced down the side of his face, but he did not blink. No, he said, but I know you. Fear moved through her, soft and cold. I don't understand. The man took one slow step closer. The two men behind him stayed near the car. Years ago, a boy was shot outside a closed restaurant on Taylor Street. Everyone ran, you didn't. You tied your scarf around his wound, called for help, and stayed with him until he stopped shaking. Isabella's lips parted, the memory returned in pieces. A winter night. A young man bleeding in an alley. Her hands covered in red. Marcus yelling from the car that they needed to leave. Isabella refusing. She had never learned the boy's name. She had only known he was scared, too young to die, and begging in Italian for his brother. The man in front of her looked at her with something far deeper than gratitude. That boy was my brother, he said. Nico Moretti. The name moved through the air like a match struck in darkness. Everyone in Chicago knew the Moretti name, even people who pretended not to. Luca Moretti was not spoken of loudly. He lived in rumors, in closed restaurants, in sudden business failures, in men who changed their tone when his car passed by. He was the shadow behind half the city's fear. Isabella stared at him, rain chilling her skin. "You're Luca." Yes, she should have run. She knew that. A woman with sense would have turned and moved away from the most feared man in Chicago. But her legs were numb, her heart was broken, and something in Luca Moretti's face held her still. He was not looking at her the way Marcus had. He was not embarrassed by her. He was not measuring her against the women inside the mansion. He looked at her as if the rain-soaked, shaking woman on the sidewalk was someone of great importance. Luca removed his coat and placed it around her shoulders. The warmth was immediate. So was the smell of him, cedar, smoke, and clean wool. Isabella clutched the edges without meaning to. "Who did this to you?" Luca asked. She looked back at the glowing mansion. Luca followed her gaze. For a moment he said nothing. Then his expression went very calm, too calm. "Marcus Hale," he said. Isabella closed her eyes. "He's my husband." "No," Luca said softly. "He is the man who forgot what you were worth." She looked at him then, and for the first time all night, a sob escaped her. She tried to cover it, but her body was too tired to hide anything. Luca moved closer, not touching her yet, waiting as if she were something wounded and sacred. "Isabella," he said, his voice low, "you saved my brother and asked for nothing. Not money, not protection, not even a name. For 7 years, I have wondered what kind of woman does that and disappears." She shook her head. "I only did what anyone should have done." "No," Luca said. "You did what most people pretend they would do." The words settled over her with strange, aching warmth. Behind them, laughter drifted faintly from the mansion. Luca's eyes sharpened. He looked past Isabella toward the tall windows where Marcus's guests moved like shadows behind gold light. "Did he put you out without a coat?" Luca asked. Isabella swallowed. "Yes. Without shoes." She did not answer. That was answer enough. Luca turned his head slightly. One of his men stepped forward. "Get the car warm," Luca said. "Call Dr. Bellini. Tell her we are coming to the house. And find everything on Marcus Hale. Every loan, every investor, every secret account, every lie he has ever told." The man nodded and moved quickly. Isabella's stomach tightened. "Please don't hurt anyone because of me." Luca looked back at her. His face softened just a little. "I do not hurt people because of you, Isabella. I answer what they did to you." "That sounds the same." "It isn't." She almost laughed, but it broke into another shiver. Luca noticed immediately. Without asking, he bent and lifted her into his arms. Isabella gasped, panic rushing through her. "No, wait. I'm too heavy." Luca's hold tightened, steady and effortless. His eyes locked onto hers. "Never say that to me again." Her breath caught. He carried her toward the car as if she weighed nothing, as if the body Marcus had mocked was not a burden but something precious pulled from a storm. Isabella did not know what to do with that. She did not know where to place the feeling of being held without shame. So she gripped his coat, lowered her face, and let the rain hide the last of her tears. As Luca settled her into the warm back seat, the mansion doors opened behind them. Marcus stepped out onto the front steps, Vanessa beside him, both of them staring at the black car by the curb. For the first time that night, Marcus did not look pleased. Luca turned slowly. Even from the car, Isabella saw Marcus's face change as he recognized him. The confidence drained first, then the color, then the smile. Luca said nothing. He only looked at Marcus across the rain. It was not a threat. It was a promise. Then he got into the car beside Isabella, closed the door, and the warm darkness wrapped around them both. As the vehicle pulled away from the mansion, Isabella looked through the tinted window at the life she had been thrown out of. The gold lights grew smaller. The music faded. Marcus stood frozen on the steps, suddenly looking less like a king and more like a man who had just made the most dangerous mistake of his life. Luca reached across the seat and gently covered Isabella's scraped hand with his own. "You are safe now," he said. Isabella did not fully believe him, not yet. But as the car moved through the rain-washed streets of Chicago, away from the house where she had been broken, and toward a world she did not understand. She felt something small and strange wake inside her chest. It was not happiness. It was not trust. It was the first breath after drowning, and somewhere behind them, inside a mansion full of frightened whispers, Marcus Hale was beginning to learn that some women are not abandoned. Some women are returned to the people powerful enough to make the whole city kneel. The car moved through Chicago like a black shadow slipping between rain and streetlight, carrying Isabella away from the house where her old life had ended. She sat wrapped in Luca Moretti's coat, her wet hair sticking to her cheeks, her scraped hands resting in her lap while the city blurred beyond the tinted glass. She kept expecting Marcus to call. She kept expecting the car to turn around. Some part of her, the tired part that had spent years forgiving him before he even apologized, still thought this had to be a nightmare that would correct itself by morning. But Marcus had closed the door. The music had started again, and Luca Moretti, a man feared by men who feared no one, sat beside her in silence as if her broken heart was something dangerous enough to deserve respect. Luca did not fill the quiet with empty comfort. He did not tell her she was lucky to be away from Marcus. He did not tell her to stop crying. He simply kept his hand near hers, warm and steady, letting her decide whether to pull away. That small patience was almost harder to bear than cruelty. Isabella knew how to survive cruelty. She had learned to smile through Marcus's sharp comments, laugh softly when investors looked past her, and swallow her hurt until it became part of her breathing. But kindness, real kindness, made her feel like glass. One touch and she might shatter. They arrived at Luca's home just before midnight. It was not a mansion meant to impress strangers. It stood behind iron gates on a quiet, tree-lined street, surrounded by old stone walls, black cameras, and men who looked like they belonged to the darkness itself. The house was wide and severe, with ivy climbing the sides and warm light glowing from deep windows. It felt older than money, older than fear. It felt like a place that had watched generations of powerful men make promises and break them. Luca stepped out first, then turned and reached for Isabella. She tried to stand on her own, but her legs trembled before her feet touched the ground. Without a word, he lifted her again. This time she did not protest. She was too cold, too tired, too hollow. She rested one hand against his shoulder and felt the steady strength beneath his coat. His jaw was tight, his eyes were forward. Anyone watching might have thought he was calm, but Isabella could feel the anger in the way he held her, careful as a prayer, controlled as a blade. Inside, the house smelled of firewood, leather, and basil. A doctor waited in a sitting room with a leather bag open beside her. Luca set Isabella on a sofa near the fireplace, then stepped back only far enough to give the doctor room. The woman cleaned Isabella's palms, checked her knees, wrapped her feet in warm towels, and spoke to her in a low, gentle voice. Isabella answered when she could. Mostly, she stared into the fire and listened to the rain tapping against the windows. When the doctor left, Luca returned with a mug of tea. He handed it to Isabella himself. "Drink," he said softly. "It will help with the shaking." "I'm not shaking because I'm cold," she whispered. "I know." She looked down at the tea, steam curled into the air between them. "You shouldn't have brought me here." "Yes," Luca said. "I should have brought you here 7 years ago." Her eyes lifted to his. He sat across from her, not too close, not too far. "Nico tried to find you after he recovered. He only remembered your first name and your face. He remembered that you kept talking to him, so he would not close his eyes. He remembered you telling him that his brother was coming, even though you did not know if that was true." Isabella's fingers tightened around the mug. "He was scared. He was dying," Luca said. "You stopped that from happening. I was just there." "No," Luca said, his voice deepening. "Other people were there. They ran. You stayed." The words settled into the room, heavy and warm. Isabella looked toward the fire. "Marcus was angry at me that night. We were late to a dinner. He said I embarrassed him by getting involved." Luca's eyes darkened. "He said that while my brother was bleeding." "He said a lot of things." She tried to smile, but it faded before it could become real. "He always said them softly at first." Luca leaned back, his face unreadable. Men like Marcus start with soft cruelty because they are cowards. They test how much pain a woman will excuse in the name of love. Then they build a throne on her silence. Isabella closed her eyes. The sentence found something inside her she had not been ready to name. Marcus had built so much on her silence. His confidence, his reputation, his whole beautiful lie. A door opened behind them. Isabella turned and saw a young man standing at the edge of the room. He looked like Luca, but softer, younger, with kinder eyes and a faint scar near his jaw. His face changed the moment he saw her. "Isabella," he said. She knew before Luca spoke. Nico Moretti crossed the room slowly, as if approaching someone sacred. Then he dropped to one knee in front of the sofa, took her bandaged hand with careful reverence and bowed his head over it. "You saved my life," he whispered. "I never got to thank you." Isabella's throat closed. "You lived," she said. That was enough. Nico looked up at her, his eyes bright. "Not for us." Something broke then, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly inside her chest. Isabella covered her mouth as a sob escaped. Nico rose and stepped back, giving her space, but Luca moved closer, kneeling beside the sofa. He did not touch her until she reached for him. Then he took her into his arms, and she cried against his shoulder while the fire burned low, and the rain washed the city clean outside. By morning, Marcus Hale's world had already begun to crack. It started with phone calls that went unanswered. A bank manager who had once laughed at Marcus's jokes suddenly became unavailable. A land broker who had promised to finalize a deal stopped responding. 2 investors asked for updated financial disclosures. A journalist sent an email asking about delayed contractor payments. Marcus stood in his study wearing the same tuxedo shirt from the night before, staring at his phone as if the screen had betrayed him. Vanessa slept upstairs in the guest room, pleased with herself and unaware that the mansion beneath her was already sinking. Marcus paced between his desk and the windows, replaying the moment he had stepped outside and seen Luca Moretti by the curb. The memory made his stomach tighten. Luca had not spoken. He had not needed to. His silence had reached across the rain and wrapped around Marcus's throat. By noon, Marcus called Isabella. The number went straight to voicemail. He called again, then again. He sent a message, short and angry at first, then longer, then softer. He told her they needed to speak like adults. He told her she had misunderstood him. He told her she had humiliated him by leaving with that man. Then he deleted the last message before sending it, because even Marcus understood that demanding dignity from the woman he had thrown into the rain sounded dangerous. At Luca's house, Isabella did not see the messages. Her phone had been recovered from the mansion by one of Luca's men before sunrise, along with her purse, her broken heel, and a small box of jewelry Marcus had not thought she deserved to keep. Luca placed everything on a table in front of her after breakfast. Isabella looked at the phone for a long time before turning it face down. "You do not have to answer him," Luca said. "I know," she said, but her voice carried the surprise of someone learning a new language. Luca watched her from across the breakfast table. She wore a soft cream sweater one of the housekeepers had found for her, loose pants, and warm slippers. Her hair was still damp from the shower, falling naturally around her face. Without makeup, without diamonds, without Marcus standing beside her like an apology, she looked younger and more tired, but also more herself. Luca found that more dangerous than any dress could ever be. "I need to tell you something," he said. Isabella looked up. Marcus's rise was not an accident. Her hand stilled near her cup. "After you saved Nico, I found out who you were. I found your husband. At the time he was drowning in debt and about to lose a development bid. You never asked me for anything, so I decided to repay the debt quietly. A recommendation here, a friendly investor there, a city permit that moved faster than it should have. Marcus believed doors opened because he was brilliant. They opened because I wanted the woman who saved my brother to have a secure life." Isabella stared at him. "Marcus never knew?" "No." She let out a breath that was almost a laugh. It hurt too much to be funny. "All these years, he thought he built everything alone." "Yes, and I thought I helped him build it." Luca's gaze softened. "You did help him, but he mistook your loyalty for weakness and my protection for his own power." Isabella looked down at her hands. They were still marked from the fall. What happens now? That depends on you. She looked at him carefully. Men like you don't usually say that. No, Luca said, but women like you do not usually save my brother and disappear. For the first time, Isabella almost smiled. The next several days passed like a strange dream. Isabella remained inside Luca's house while Chicago whispered around her. Luca did not lock her doors. He did not force her to stay in one room, but his world surrounded her completely. Guards stood in the halls. Cars waited outside. Calls came in at all hours, with documents, tablets, folders, and quiet voices. Luca listened, decided, and changed lives with a few words spoken softly over coffee. Isabella should have been afraid. Sometimes she was. But fear was not the only thing she felt. She felt curiosity. She felt distance from the woman she had been. She wandered through Luca's library and found shelves of old poetry beside books on law, finance, and Italian history. She sat with Nico in the kitchen while he told her how he had survived the shooting and how Luca had nearly torn the city apart looking for the men responsible. She helped the housekeeper make sauce one evening, and when Luca walked in to find flour on Isabella's cheek and Nico laughing beside her, he stopped in the doorway as if he had walked into a church. On the fourth night, Luca found Isabella standing before a full-length mirror in a room filled with gowns. A designer had come earlier with quiet respect and measuring tape, and now Isabella wore a deep emerald dress that held her body instead of hiding it. The fabric curved over her breasts, shaped softly at her waist, and fell in clean lines over her hips. She touched the side of the dress with uncertain fingers. "It is too much," she said when she saw Luca behind her in the mirror. "No," he said. "It is finally enough." She looked at him through the glass. Marcus would have hated this dress. Marcus hated anything that reminded him you were alive. The words should have hurt, but instead they steadied her. Isabella turned slowly. "Why are you doing all this?" Luca stepped into the room. "Because I owe you. That was 7 years ago. Then because I want to." "That sounds more dangerous." "It is." Her breath caught at the honesty. Luca stopped close enough for her to feel the warmth of him, but not close enough to trap her. "Tomorrow night," he said, "Marcus will attend the Whitaker Foundation gala. He believes he can still save himself there. He will try to convince the investors that the rumors are nothing. He will smile, he will lie, he will look for someone weaker to blame." "Me," Isabella whispered. "Yes." She looked away. Luca's voice became softer. "Come with me." Her eyes snapped back to his. "To the gala, yes." "I can't walk into that room." "You can. They all saw what happened." "They saw what Marcus did," Luca said. "Tomorrow they will see what he lost." Silence stretched between them. Isabella looked back at the mirror. The woman staring at her looked unfamiliar. Not thin, not small, not hidden. She looked like someone who had been hurt and had survived long enough to become dangerous in a quiet way. "What if I break?" she asked. Luca's face softened. "Then I will stand close enough that no one sees." The Whitaker Foundation gala filled the grand ballroom of the Langham with gold light, white flowers, and the low hum of people pretending not to gossip. By 8 o'clock, everyone had heard something. Marcus Hale's funding was unstable. A major investor had withdrawn. City permits were under review. A contractor was threatening to sue. No one knew the full truth, but wealthy people could smell blood even through perfume. Marcus arrived with Vanessa on his arm, smiling too brightly. His tuxedo was perfect, but his skin looked pale under the lights. Vanessa stayed close, whispering through her smile, asking why people were staring. Marcus told her to relax. He told her everything was under control, but his eyes kept moving toward the doors. Then the room quieted, not all at once. Quiet traveled in a wave, beginning near the entrance and moving across the ballroom as heads turned and conversations died. Luca Moretti entered in a black suit, calm as midnight. Isabella walked beside him. For one breath, the ballroom seemed to forget how to breathe. The woman who had been dragged from a dinner party days earlier now moved beneath the chandeliers with Luca's hand resting lightly at her back. The emerald dress glowed against her skin. Her hair fell in soft waves. Diamonds touched her ears, but they did not make her beautiful. They only proved that someone had finally dressed her like the truth. Marcus stared, His mouth parted slightly. His hand slipped from Vanessa's waist. Isabella saw him. For a moment the old pain rose, sharp and familiar. Then Luca leaned down just enough for only her to hear. "Breathe, Isabella." She did. The room watched as Luca guided her forward. People moved aside before him. Mrs. Whittaker appeared near the center of the ballroom, her face pale beneath its careful makeup. She greeted Luca with a trembling smile. "Mr. Moretti," she said, "we weren't aware you would be attending." "I rarely announce myself," Luca replied. His eyes moved to Marcus. Marcus forced a laugh and stepped forward. "Luca," he said too warmly, too quickly, "this is unexpected, is it?" Marcus swallowed. His gaze flicked to Isabella. "I see my wife has been dramatic." The room went still again. Luca smiled faintly. It was not a kind smile. "Choose your next words carefully." Marcus's face tightened. He looked around and saw people watching, waiting. Pride pushed him where wisdom would not. "This is a private matter. Isabella and I had a difficult evening, but she has always been emotional. I'm sure whatever she told you sounded worse than it was." For the first time, Isabella spoke. Her voice was quiet, but clear. "You threw me outside barefoot in the rain." A soft gasp moved through the crowd. Marcus's jaw clenched. "After you made a scene." "No," Isabella said. "After you made me one." Luca lifted one hand. A man behind him stepped forward with a slim folder. Luca took it and held it at his side. "Marcus Hale," Luca said. "Ours $13 million across private loans, delayed construction payments, and investor advances moved through accounts he had no right to touch. His latest project was funded by promises he could not keep, with numbers changed after review and signatures placed on documents that were never properly approved." Marcus went white. "That's absurd. It is documented. You have no right." "I have every right," Luca said. "Some of those funds were connected to people under my protection. Some of those doors opened because I allowed them to open, and all of them are now closed." The ballroom seemed smaller. Marcus looked around for support and found none. Investors who had once laughed at his jokes stared at him like spoiled meat. Mrs. Whittaker stepped back. Vanessa released his arm. Marcus's mask began to crack. "Isabella," he said, turning to her with sudden desperation, "tell them this isn't true." She looked at him for a long moment. This was the voice he used when he needed rescuing. She knew it better than any song. It had pulled her out of sleep at midnight, made her forgive insults, made her explain away his failures, made her hold together a life that cut her hands every time she touched it. "Please," Marcus whispered. "You know me, yes," Isabella said. "I do." Hope flashed in his eyes. That hope should have pleased her. Instead, it only made her tired. "You used my love like a ladder," she said. "You climbed as high as you could, and when you thought you were above me, you kicked me away." Marcus stepped closer. Luca's men shifted, but Isabella lifted a hand slightly, stopping them. "I was angry," Marcus said. "I said things. But we can fix this. You don't belong with me. We built this together." "No," Isabella said softly. "I built a life with you. You built a stage for yourself." His voice broke. "Isabella, please. If you say the right thing, they'll listen. Tell them I'm not a thief. Tell them I'm not ruined." She looked at the man she had loved for years and finally saw him clearly. Not as the scared young husband she once fed hope to. Not as the dreamer she protected. Not as the man she kept waiting for, thinking love would return if she was patient enough. She saw a man who only wanted her when she was useful, who only reached for her hand when he was falling. Her heart did not harden. It simply stopped offering itself as a place for him to land. "You threw me away," she said. "Now stay gone." The words moved through the ballroom like a door closing forever. Marcus stared at her, his face folded into anger because shame had nowhere else to go. "You think he loves you," he snapped, pointing at Luca. "You think a man like that sees anything but a debt? You're still the same woman I left outside. He dressed you up, that's all." Luca moved so fast the room barely registered it. One moment he stood beside Isabella. The next he was in front of Marcus, close enough that Marcus stumbled back. "You left her in the cold?" Luca said, his voice low and quiet. "So you will leave my sight the same way." Two of Luca's men took Marcus by the arms. He fought them at first, but panic made him weak. The crowd parted as they pulled him toward the doors. Vanessa did not follow. No one did. Marcus shouted Isabella's name once, then again, each time less like a husband and more like a man calling for a rope that had already been cut. The ballroom doors opened. Cold air swept in from the rainy street outside. Luca's men dragged Marcus down the front steps and left him beneath the same kind of weather he had forced Isabella to walk through. His tuxedo darkened in the rain. His hair fell across his forehead. His polished shoes slipped on the wet stone as he tried to stand. Through the open doors, Isabella watched him look back at her. There was no triumph in her face. Only peace. Luca returned to her side. "Are you all right?" Isabella looked at Marcus one last time. Then she turned away. "I will be." Luca offered his arm. She took it. Behind them, the gala remained silent, but the silence had changed. It was no longer the hungry silence of people waiting for a woman to be humiliated. It was the stunned quiet of people realizing they had watched a queen remember her crown. In the weeks that followed, Marcus Hale disappeared from every room he had once begged to enter. His investors sued. His accounts were frozen. His projects collapsed under the weight of their own lies. Vanessa returned to safer company. Mrs. Whittaker sent flowers to Isabella with a note that Isabella did not bother to answer. Chicago learned quickly, as cities like Chicago always do, that Marcus had not risen by genius alone, and that the woman he called useless had been the one thing standing between him and the truth. Isabella did not become cruel. That surprised some people. They expected revenge to change her into something sharp and bitter. Instead, freedom made her softer in a stronger way. She moved into Luca's world slowly, not as a prisoner, not as a decoration, but as a woman learning the shape of her own power. She sat beside Nico at family dinners. She advised Luca on which charities were real and which were laundering guilt through pretty words. She opened a shelter for women leaving dangerous homes and funded it with money Marcus once thought would build his empire. And Luca watched her become herself, with the quiet wonder of a man who had seen beautiful things before but never anything like her. One evening, months after the gala, Isabella stood on the balcony of Luca's home, looking over the city. The air was cold but not cruel. Lights shimmered along the streets, and somewhere far below, cars moved like sparks through the dark. Luca came up behind her and placed a coat gently over her shoulders. "You always bring me coats," she said. "You keep standing in the cold," he replied. She smiled. It was small but real. Not anymore. Luca stood beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. For a while neither of them spoke. They did not need to. The city stretched beneath them, full of secrets, debts, danger, and power. Once Isabella had believed she needed to shrink to survive inside rooms that were never built for her. Now those rooms opened when she entered. Men lowered their voices. Women watched her with curiosity. People who had once looked through her now looked up, but the greatest change was quieter than all of that. When Isabella looked at herself, she no longer saw the woman Marcus had tried to throw away. She saw the hands that had saved a life, the body that had survived shame, the heart that had loved deeply and still found the courage to stop bleeding for someone who enjoyed the wound. Luca turned toward her. "Do you regret it?" She knew what he meant. The gala, Marcus, the choice, the strange road that had brought her here. Isabella looked out over Chicago, calm and bright beneath the night sky. "No," she said. "For the first time I think I finally came home." Luca took her hand and raised it to his lips, then let the city know. Isabella looked at him, her eyes warm with quiet strength. "Know what? That Isabella Romano is no man's burden, no man's shame, no man's discarded wife." His thumb moved gently over her knuckles. "She is under my protection, beside my family, and above every person who ever mistook her kindness for weakness." A slow smile touched her mouth. "And what does that make me?" Luca's gaze held hers, dark and certain. "The untouchable queen of Chicago," he said. This time, Isabella did not look away from the words. She accepted them. Not because Luca gave them to her, but because she had earned them in every quiet year she survived, every insult she swallowed, every act of love she gave without being seen. Marcus had thrown her into the rain believing he was ending her story. Instead, he had delivered her to the one man in Chicago, powerful enough to show the world what she had always been. And from that night forward, whenever people whispered Isabella Romano's name, they no longer whispered with pity. They whispered with respect. They whispered with fear. And most of all, they whispered about the woman who was abandoned in the rain and rose from it like a queen.